This guy only took a single hibernation nap, but the result ended up lasting for a whopping 100 million years. When he woke up, the world had completely changed, and he officially became a primitive man. To make matters worse, he was even looked down upon as an inferior being just because he wasn't a beast man, which is so infuriating. But he wasn't about to hide his true skills at all. With just one punch, he defeated an S-rank boss, leaving everyone absolutely terrified. Could this power belong to a god? The story dates back to 100 million years ago, in the 22nd century, on a planet called Earth. A devastating catastrophe completely overwhelmed everything. Amidst the fiery sky, a fighter jet soared past the ruined remnants of the city, carrying with it a solitary figure standing firmly on the wing of the plane. He softly muttered, "I've finally found it." Immediately, he threw himself down from a height of thousands of meters. Ignoring the wind howling around his body, down on the ground, a young boy was running frantically through the deserted streets, breathing heavily in utter despair and screaming, "Is anyone there?" The boy cried and wailed in pain. Is there anyone else left alive? However, responding to his call were not humans, but rather the appearance of hideous monsters. With blood-red eyes, they surrounded him from all sides, causing him to collapse to the ground, crying out for help in vain. "Someone save me. Please call emergency services for me." While still clutching a shattered family photo in his hand, the boy desperately pleaded, "Anyone at all, please come and help." He deeply hated those who had turned this world into a heap of ashes, and prayed for someone to make them pay for their crimes. Right at that moment, a flash of light tore through the sky and shot down like an arrow. Jean appeared with full, majestic power, delivering a fatal blow that knocked down the monster, right in front of the boy's eyes. "I am truly sorry for arriving too late." The boy looked up at the unfamiliar, mighty man before him in utter astonishment. Who are you?" The boy smiled through his tears, as if he had found his last shred of hope. "Ah, that's right. In the end, finally. We can finally reclaim our world now." Jean, gently holding the boy in his arms, he softly replied to comfort the poor soul, "Yes, that's right. So please rest in peace." On the boy's back was a fatal, extremely severe wound. The boy feebly muttered his final thanks before passing away completely in his arms. "Thank you so much. Thank you, Jean." Standing frozen amidst the ruins, watching the breath of the only human he had just found fade away, Kagura approached from behind and uttered bitter words. "Jean, you arrived as late as a party guest." He asserted that the boy just now was indeed the last survivor of this land. Kagura coldly demanded Jean to look straight at the harsh reality that the human race had truly gone extinct. Earth now was nothing more than a dead planet submerged in the crimson hue of destruction. The disgusting mutated monsters and the corrupted creatures, born from prolonged environmental pollution, had wiped out every civilization. They possessed an unimaginable ability to regenerate their bodies, making it so that even nuclear weapons could not wipe them out. However, the last scientists had never intended to give up. By continuously conducting brutal experiments on human bodies, they ultimately found a special tool to begin the counterattack. Kagura looked down at the ruins, his voice filled with despair. "It's over. There's no one left to save. Let's head back, buddy." Looking at the body of the last survivor who had just passed away, he bitterly admitted that both of them had truly arrived too late. However, Jean still stood firm, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "There is still something worthy for us to protect." When Kagura skeptically asked if he believed there were still survivors out there, Jean softly replied, "Not exactly, but rather, in the future." Kagura looked at the microscopic particles and asked, "The nanomachines that you painstakingly created, they also have the ability to heal the environment, right?" Jean confirmed that was true. That nano-army not only negates the regeneration capabilities of the corrupted ones, but they also activate the revival process for this planet. Jean believed that one day, this planet would reclaim its inherent beauty, and at that exact moment, a new civilization would definitely flourish once again, just as humanity once did. Hearing those hopeful words, Kagura could only let out an exclamation. That sounds like a far-fetched fairy tale. Kagura was the most clear-headed of them all, overly realistic, but to Jean, that alone was more than enough. He stood silently amidst the ruins, smiling serenely, because just a tiny glimmer of hope was enough for him to continue his journey. Jean knew very well that the power he possessed could become extremely essential for the future ahead. He decided to step into the hibernation pod, betting everything on a distant future. Kagura looked at his partner, thinking to himself that believing in the words hope might actually be the key to saving the entire world. He told himself that just passing on the opportunity to the next generation was enough. Then decisively pressed the activation button to begin Jin's 10,000-year sleep. The hibernation system was officially initiated, marking the beginning of a journey through time. Behind the cold steel casing, the numbers on the gauge began to skyrocket, marking the passage of hundreds, then thousands of long, grueling years. The Earth at this time was still a living hell, where hideous mutated creatures ruled, scouring through ruined remnants and deadly wastelands. Time kept passing by until the numbers hit the millions of years mark. Under the impact of the nanoparticles, the atmosphere gradually changed. The fiery crimson hue of destruction retreated for the hopeful green of the oceans and vegetation. Gentle animals began to appear on the lush green meadows, marking the miraculous revival of the blue planet after so many historical ups and downs. 100 million years later, an infinitely long period of time had passed since the day Jin entered his deep sleep. Suddenly, the system issued a notification that the access code has been confirmed, and the process to release the hibernation state has begun. At the same time, in a desolate area, Hakama was running away with all her might, her breathing heavy and full of panic. Behind her and her two friends, Denpao and Sandy, was a giant beast, with blood-red eyes, baring its fangs and waiting to pounce on them. The trio running for their lives was a classic horror movie combo. On the line between life and death, Denpao anxiously asked if he was truly in a place like this. Hakama still firmly replied, "He definitely is," even though Sandy was trembling with fear, worrying that if he wasn't here, all three of them would certainly face death. Hakama still resolutely asserted, "He really is here." She tightly gripped the key around her neck, her eyes gleaming with an intense faith in the guardian deity. The three of them stood before the giant metal door of the shelter, believing that he was definitely present right behind this steel layer. Hakama led her group of friends deep inside the shelter, but she suddenly stopped. "Hey, look," Denpao and Sandy panicked upon realizing the exit was blocked. "It's a dead end ahead." Right at that moment, the ferocious monster with blood-red eyes caught up, baring its sharp teeth and blocking the only pathway. Sandy trembled in utter despair. "Wait, what should we do now?" Facing imminent death, Hakama could only look up and desperately plead, "Please save us." As if by magic, the glass of the hibernation chamber suddenly shattered. The system blared a notification. "Request accepted." A blinding beam of light exploded, destroying the pod and shooting out like an arrow. That beam of light pierced straight into the monster's head, knocking it far away in the blink of an eye. Witnessing that scene, all three children stood stunned, unable to believe their eyes. A pair of bare feet stepped out from the ruins, treading upon the shattered pieces of glass. Jin had officially awakened with a robust physique and eyes glowing with immense power. He let out a proud smile, tightly gripping the surging nano-energy in his hands, ready to believe in the infinite possibilities of the future. Looking at the storage box, he silently thanked, admired the incredible effectiveness of the thing that Kagura had built. It was truly fortunate that his suit was still preserved, perfectly, just like in the beginning. He walked over to the control panel, began accessing the data, and wondered if this was really the world from 100 million years later. Even though most of the critical data was heavily corrupted, Jin still couldn't help but be surprised that this shelter could stand firm through such an incredibly long period of time. He silently guessed it was probably all thanks to the presence of the nano particles in the air. Right next to it, the nanomicronutrient injection device was also ready for use. Jin held the message cube in his hand, the only thing that Kagura had left behind, his heart full of anxiety about the events that had unfolded on Earth. However, before digging deeper into it, he suddenly realized a rather awkward problem. Jin turned to ask the three children, "Could you guys tell me about the current situation?" Seeing Denpao frantically cover Hakama's eyes, he suddenly snapped out of it and thought to himself, "Oh, how extremely rude of me." It turned out he had been nonchalantly standing naked in front of the kids, sleeping for 100 million years only to end up flashing everyone. After quickly putting his clothes back on, Jin thought to himself with satisfaction, being this handsome is what's truly worthy of a hero. He donned his majestic long cloak, ready to face the new era. Jin walked toward the exit, putting his strength into pushing open the giant shelter door that had been tightly shut for so long. Stepping out of the shelter with the three children, Jin stood frozen before the magnificent natural landscape unfolding before his eyes. He wondered in utter amazement. So this is actually the world after 100 million long years. Before him lay a lush green land, with rolling mountain ranges and a winding river. Absolutely not a single trace was left of the era he once lived in. While Jean was immersed in his astonishment, Hakama gently tugged at his coat and called out, Guardian deity? Hakama waved her hand to lead the way and urged, please follow me this way, stay close to us. Looking at the figures of the 3 children running ahead, Jean couldn't help but be skeptical. He wondered if these were truly humans, given that humanity was supposed to have gone extinct since the previous era. Perhaps during that long period of time, they had evolved to have a human-like appearance due to being affected by the nanoparticles in the air. The fact that they still used the same language from 100 million years ago was the clearest proof for this hypothesis. Jean smiled faintly. By the way, I haven't had the chance to introduce myself yet. My name is Jean Silo. You can just call me Jean. The leading girl politely replied, my name is Hakamafin. You can just call me Hakama. The Beastman boy also chimed in quickly, and I'm Denpao. The remaining boy timidly followed up, I am Sandy. Jean nodded and asked straight to the point. So what's next? What do you guys want me to help with? Hakama replied while leading him by the hand. We're almost there. Hakama's eyes turned resolute as she made her plea. Please deal with the invaders for us. Jean was slightly surprised and repeated, invaders? Before he could ask anything more, Sandy suddenly turned pale, trembling and crying out in horror. Oh no, our village is completely burned down. In the distance, their village was engulfed in a sea of fire. Plumes of black smoke billowing up, tearing through the peaceful sky. Overcome with panic, Sandy and Hakama ran straight toward the fire, desperately crying out for their parents, father, mother. Hakama frantically chased after them. Wait up, don't run so fast. Jean quietly followed behind, his eyes carefully scanning the scene. He noticed that the barriers and the rows of houses here were all crudely built of wood. Jean silently assessed that it seemed the civilization level of this new humanity had not progressed very much yet. Just as they arrived, Hakama was horrified by the chaotic scene before her eyes. A hideous creature was pinning down an elderly woman. The girl could only scream in agony. Grandmother. Recognizing her granddaughter, the old woman yelled in panic while struggling to resist. Is that you, Hakama? Why did you come back here at a time like this? Standing in the back, Jean quietly observed the attacking entity and thought to himself, is that the invader everyone was talking about? It looks no different from a corrupted one. Could it be that in this era, people call them invaders? Ignoring her grandmother's urging to leave this area immediately, Hakama resolutely refused to back down. Her body suddenly emitted a vibrant green energy, and she proudly declared, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying to help you. This little girl is truly something else. Witnessing this scene, Jean was slightly surprised by the strange energy reaction coming from the girl, and he told himself it was time to step in and verify everything. With terrifying speed, Jean rushed forward, delivering a heavy blow that wounded the monster and sent it flying away, saving the old woman just in time. He gently supported her and softly said, let me handle this. Step back a bit. Seeing the backup from the guardian deity, Jean immediately encouraged Hakama. Great. Go ahead. Without hesitation, the girl concentrated all her power into the palm of her hand, creating a blazing fireball and launching it straight at the enemy. A massive surge of energy exploded, knocking down the monster and leaving it only able to roar in pain before becoming completely motionless. Looking at the monster lying defeated on the ground, Jean silently confirmed that the microparticles were working effectively, as the cells of the corrupted one showed no signs of regeneration. He couldn't help but wonder about the energy the girl had just used. Did that girl just manipulate the nanomachines in the atmosphere? Normally, only those with a compatible body type can do that, but... Turning to the old woman, Jean curiously asked if that fireball was a common ability in this era. The old woman replied in surprise. What do you mean this era? No. Only a small number of people possess that ability. Those are the ones who possess divine power. Counting me, there are only exactly 4 people in this village. Jean pondered in deep thought upon realizing that the divine power they worshipped was actually just what they called the energy used to control the nanomachines. Hakama frantically ran over to ask her grandmother about the status of everyone in the village. The old woman reassured her that she had already evacuated all the villagers, but at the same time, reproached the children with a somber face for returning to this dangerous place. The old woman bitterly admitted that the village was practically at its end, because the monster they had just struggled to destroy was actually just a newly hatched juvenile. The old woman explained while trembling that they were completely helpless against the actual adults, and before long, A whole swarm of baby monsters would flood in and wipe out this entire place. Right at that moment, Zack appeared looking completely confident. He told his grandmother to stop being so cowardly and asserted that those invaders were nothing compared to his strength. He would personally tear all of them to pieces. When the old woman asked about the villagers' whereabouts, Zack stated that he had personally led all of them to the safe shelter. Seeing her father coming along, Hakama rushed over to hug him in sheer joy. Her father was both relieved and worried, demanding to know where his daughter had gone, which had made him frantically look for her when he didn't see her at the shelter. Hearing Hakama confess that she had gone to the sealed door, her grandmother couldn't help but be horrified, scolding her granddaughter for being too reckless to dare enter that forbidden land. However, Hakama looked toward Jean and explained that she did so because she believed in her grandmother's story, that the guardian deity sleeping deeply behind that door would appear to rescue the village when they encountered a great disaster. The old woman looked at Jean from head to toe with extremely skeptical eyes. She thought to herself that he didn't look like he had the demeanor of a god at all. Zack, standing nearby, also uttered words of contempt. He mocked the idea that someone from an inferior species like Jean could possibly be a guardian deity. It could also be a guardian spirit, and asked everyone to stop joking around. Being too cocky will get you slapped in the face soon. That phrase made Jean dazed for a moment, and he repeated it with a thoughtful face. An inferior species? My man is smiling in contempt. Sandy hastily spoke up to defend him. Brother, this person really is our guardian deity. However, Zack only coldly replied. What? I kept wondering where you went. Turned out you went with Hakama? He approached Jean, pointed straight at his head, and mocked. Just look at his ears. He is just an inferior person without any beast race traits at all. Zack firmly asserted that Jean just happened to be lingering around there, and the children had made a terrible mistake. Even though Sandy insisted that Jean himself had defeated an invader with his own hands, Zack still smirked. That one, I only need one move to make it disappear. He pointed his sharp spearhead at Jean, warning in a low voice. Listen carefully. This is our village's internal matter. We don't need a lowly outsider interfering. Having finished his words, Zack turned his back and walked away, not forgetting to leave a threat. Don't you dare meddle foolishly. When the father panicked and asked where he was going, Zack proudly declared that he was going to eradicate that giant monster completely. He looked back and uttered words of contempt. As for you guys, just stay here and tremble. The old woman angrily scolded. You idiot. Then she turned to urge the children to hide quickly to save their lives. The old woman looked at Jean with eyes full of gratitude mixed with pleading. All right, I don't know who you are, but thank you anyway for helping the children. If you don't mind, please lead these children to the shelter, along with my son, will you? She decided she had to chase after and stop Zack playing this final gamble. However, Jean suddenly spoke up. Sorry, I'm not free to be a servant for your guy. The words left the old woman stunned. Jean coldly asserted. I have my own pride too. I can't just stand by and watch him keep calling me an inferior being. Looking toward Zack, who was leaving, Jean flashed a chilling smile. So just let him go and throw his life away. From the water's edge, a giant monster with bumpy skin and eyes, glowing red, emerged, roaring across the entire sky. Facing that brutal creature, Zack showed no fear at all. Instead, he looked completely arrogant. He tightly gripped his spear, letting a blue electric current envelop his body, and loudly declared, Hey, you beast over there. I am the one who will shoulder the destiny of this nation on my back. A warrior destined to become a holy knight. Looking at the hideous monster bearing its fangs and claws before his eyes, Zack uttered words of utter contempt. Are you just an invader of this level? He concentrated his strength into the tip of his spear, rushing straight toward the target at a terrifying speed and roaring. Don't get in my way. Let me solo this and show you. A thunderous thrust struck down, making the monster howl in pain and scream in despair. The battle became increasingly intense as other monsters began to surround Zack from all sides. Amidst the enemy's encirclement, he continuously swung his spear, creating sharp slashes of blue energy and yelling, You are getting in my way. Zack was completely confident in his own strength. He growled and asserted, This single slash of mine is more than enough to finish you off. Zack gained momentum and leaped into the air, channeling all his power into the decisive blow. Take this. With an extremely smooth slash, he cut straight through the giant monster's body. Zack landed with a triumphant smile, watching the monster collapse with a tragic shriek, before becoming completely motionless. However, Zack's smile was quickly wiped away when the deep, gaping Wounds on the monster's body suddenly closed up. The flesh convulsed and healed itself at a terrifying speed. Zack turned pale, stammering and unable to believe his eyes. The cuts on its body are regenerating? Immediately, a colossal shadow loomed over him. The monster swung its sharp claw, delivering a thunderous strike that left Zack only able to brace himself for the impact in utter despair. In that critical, split-second moment, a familiar figure suddenly appeared, blocking the way right in front of Zack. Jean stood there, calmly facing the giant monster, with a glowing nanotechnology shield covering his arm. He coldly spoke in a mocking tone. "Are you done putting on a show, kid? Let me take over." Zack stood frozen, cold sweat pouring down his forehead, as he looked at the back of the man he had just treated with contempt. The monster roared frantically, but Jean only curled his lip with a proud expression. Zack, standing behind, was still completely stunned. These creatures are still able to move. Without giving the opponent time to react, Jean raised his hand and made a decisive movement. Immediately, an earth-shattering surge of energy shot straight up from the ground, piercing through the monster's chest. The monster was knocked backward. Zack stood frozen in the middle of the water, blankly staring at the remaining debris and asking himself, what on earth is happening? From afar, the grandmother and the villagers also ran over frantically. They kept calling his name in extreme anxiety. "Grandmother, quickly run this way. Hurry up, Zack." However, when witnessing the scene and Jin's unimaginable power with her own eyes, the old woman could only stand frozen to the spot with a horrified expression. What the hell is unfolding before my eyes? What kind of terrifying thing is this? Witnessing the giant monster being blocked with just one hand, Zack couldn't help but exclaim in shock. A body that colossal and massive, yet he could stop it with just one hand. He was bragging earlier, but now he's speechless. Jean felt the pressure gradually increasing, and he softly muttered, "I'm starting to feel it get heavier." Immediately, he requested everyone temporarily fall back. Then he decisively grabbed Zack and soared away to avoid the attack from the hideous creature. After bringing Zack to a safe landing, Jean let go, leaving him still completely stunned, trembling as he asked, "Mister, are you a human or a transforming robot?" Jean looked toward the monster and calmly explained, "Those creatures can regenerate themselves instantly, no matter how much damage you inflict on them." He asserted, "That is precisely the reason why one must use nanomachines to completely lock down their ability to regenerate." Hearing the unfamiliar concept, Zack asked blankly, "Nanoparticles?" Jean explained that it was exactly the thing that people of this era have always called divine power. He also didn't forget to comment on his opponent's previous effort. "Your attack just now wasn't half bad either. Too bad it was too shallow to trigger the effect that prevents regeneration." Faced with that overwhelming power, Zack asked, trembling, "Is it true that you are indeed the guardian deity from the legends?" Jean coldly replied, "I am no god at all. However, there is one thing I need to make clear to you right now." Jean looked straight into Zack's eyes and repeated, "You asserted that this is an internal matter of this village, correct?" Even though Zack still tried to brace himself and shout to assert his claim. "Why yes, that's right. That's why I—" Jean decisively cut him off. "You are dead wrong." He rushed toward the frantically roaring monster and declared, "In reality, this is my own problem." The monster bared its sharp teeth and roared furiously. As it faced Jin's assault, Jean soared forward at a terrifying speed, his sharp and cold eyes fully focused on the target. He authoritatively declared, "Stay still, let me show you a small technical error." With just a snap of his fingers, surges of nano-energy powerfully erupted, repeatedly striking down, leaving the monster utterly disoriented and unable to react. Jean coldly exposed the truth about the enemy's origin. These bizarre things are the very monsters born from our own foolishness. Clenching his fist tightly to gather his strength, blazing blue electric currents began to envelop his arm. Jean proudly asserted his responsibility. Precisely for that reason, as someone who has survived from the era of 100 million years ago, it is I who must be the one to clean up this mess. I must take responsibility to end this mess with my own hands. The energy flow in Jin's hands kept growing larger, emitting a terrifying pressure that made the surrounding space vibrate. Zack, standing behind, trembled and asked in disbelief, "I don't really understand everything you're saying, but can you actually do it?" Jean only replied with a short yet heavy statement, "I definitely can." Short, concise, and 100% reliable. Jean lowered his voice as tragic historical memories flashed through his mind. "Because I am a product created by human civilization, carrying a bloody history of endless days filled with brutality and heartbreaking tragedy, from ancient warriors to modern soldiers, and the brutal laboratory experiments. All are testimonies to a cruel past that molded him. The last surviving human individual. Jin's murderous intent erupted as he roared, and it is also I. Immediately, a colossal pillar of energy shot out from his hand, piercing through the sky and engulfing the monster. The hideous creature could only gape its mouth in horror before being completely wiped out by that destructive power in an earth-shattering explosion. The destructive beam of light from Jin's hand shot up into the sky, so powerful that it pierced through the atmosphere and could be clearly seen from outer space. Witnessing that divine power, the entire village, from the elderly to young children, stood frozen, their eyes reflecting sheer horror mixed with worship. Hakama looked at her guardian deity, with eyes sparkling with absolute faith and admiration. Her heart was overwhelmed with emotion now that the village had truly been saved. As the smoke and dust gradually cleared, the sky was torn open to reveal a patch of deep blue space. Zack sat flat on the ground, drenched in sweat, his mouth stammering incoherently after witnessing with his own eyes what he called an ultimate scientific weapon. Jin nonchalantly brushed the dust off his shoulder. Casually brushed the dust off his shoulder, as if he had just done something completely obvious. Then he slightly turned his head with a sharp, cold look and uttered a single curt phrase. Done. Much better. However, that entire earth-shattering battle just now had caught the eye of a stranger. From inside the bushes, a girl with orange hair and glasses was secretly observing through a lens. She was originally dispatched here to investigate the newly appeared invading creature in the Kodama village area, but accidentally witnessed an unimaginable sight. She wondered in utter astonishment. What on earth is this? Even the captain couldn't do something like that. Realizing the serious nature of the situation, the girl silently made up her mind that she had to rush back to the capital immediately. With a face full of excitement mixed with anxiety, she stood right up to prepare for her journey to report this entire shocking incident to the guildmaster. Jin, open the message cube. And Kagura's voice rang out, breaking the quiet atmosphere. Can you hear me, Jin? Kagura continued in a low, melancholy, and distant tone. If you are listening to these words, then perhaps by then, I am no longer in this world anymore. Being so dramatic, it's a waste he didn't become an actor. However, right after that, he changed his tone, looking completely smug. Haha, I've always wanted to say a classic movie line like that just once. Jin could only stand frozen with a face full of weariness at his partner's hard-to-die habit. Kagura curiously asked about the future world and guessed that the global environment must have been improved a lot under the impact of the nanoparticles. However, Kagura's expression in the recording suddenly became serious when mentioning a problem that had arisen. He went straight to the main point. The environment is green now, but those monsters still cling to life like leeches. Jin gazed thoughtfully at the image of the hideous monster roaring. Realizing that this war was still far from over, Kagura revealed that he had started to notice something was amiss. About a millennium after Jin began his long-term hibernation, to be able to directly observe the changes of the world through each period, he had decided to perform an operation to turn himself into a cyborg. Kagura himself also had to undergo periodic hibernation, looking from the satellite in outer space. Thanks to the regeneration of the natural environment, the number of the corrupted ones had indeed decreased quite significantly. However, amidst the lands that seemed peaceful, a terrifying new entity had appeared. It was a creature in human form with blazing purple hair and blood-red eyes full of murderous intent, standing majestically next to the carcass of a freshly defeated beast. Along with the changes in natural conditions, the evolutionary variants of the corrupted ones had begun to emerge with superior strength. Kagura was anxious because he wasn't sure what direction their mutations would take, but they would certainly become an unpredictable threat to the new civilization. The only thing he could do at that time was to prepare the new generation, like Zack, Hakama, or Denpao, to help them have enough capability to resist those monsters. Even if it was just a tiny bit, Kagura continued to reveal a backup source of power that he had specially prepared exclusively for Jin. Looking at the syringe containing the brilliant green solution in his hand, Jin couldn't help but be skeptical. This tiny syringe is what you call power. Kagura explained that as long as Jin activated it, the nanomachines would automatically resonate and guide him on how to operate it. Without a moment of hesitation, Jin decisively jabbed the needle into his arm. letting the flow of nanomachines enter and spread throughout his bloodstream. Through the body enhancement process, Jean officially became the only individual who was absolutely compatible with Nano, possessing an ultimate power that no one else could ever touch. Feeling the new energy surging, Jean extended his hand and was astonished to see a sharp blade gradually forming from the glowing energy circles. He quickly realized, so this is the ability to construct matter by restructuring the shape of the nano microparticles. Holding the handy item that had just been created in his hand, Jean silently admired the incredible capability of this technology. Kagura further stated that he had hidden similar upgrade energy sources at secret research facilities scattered all across the planet. Dispersing these energy sources was a precaution against the risk of them falling into the hands of the corrupted ones or being completely destroyed all at once. Above all, Kagura wanted Jean to personally set out and explore the vast world out there, as he himself could not anticipate the level of danger that the corrupted ones would pose in that distant future. Kagura smiled as he left his final message in the recording. Why worry? Just go travel and enjoy the scenery to live life to the fullest. Kagura looked at Jean with a gentle, yet deeply regretful gaze through the virtual reality screen. I won't be able to stay by your side to witness that with you with my own eyes. This partner is getting a bit too sappy, guys. He brushed aside his personal emotions, smiling as he entrusted his final hope to his partner. Everything relies on you, Jean. The message ended. Jean silently gripped the cube in his hand, softly replying like a promise of honor. I understand. Right at that moment, the voices of Hakama and Denpao rang out from behind. Guardian deity. So you're over here. Denpao frantically ran over to report that everyone in the village was frantically looking all over for him. Hakama took Jin's hand and urged, please return quickly. The banquet can't possibly start without the main character. As they walked, Jin's gaze suddenly locked onto the necklace that Hakama was wearing. He was silently astonished upon recognizing its familiar shape. The key to the research institute is being worn as jewelry. Jean spoke up, asking the girl about the origin of that pendant. Hakama did not hesitate to explain that her clan had received it from a great figure from ancient times. The girl cherished the bronze key in her hands and continued, this is a protective amulet, passed down through many generations. People say that if the village falls into grave danger, this item will guide the deity to protect and shield us. Hearing this, Jean smiled faintly as all the questions in his heart were answered. So that's why? No wonder she was able to step inside. He looked at the backs of the two children enthusiastically, leading the way, and told himself that he owed them a massive favor. The three of them returned to the village together, where a grand feast was taking place next to a blazing campfire. Cheers echoed through every pathway. Go this way. Hurry up, everyone. However, amidst that lively atmosphere, Jin's appearance still met with skeptical looks from some of the villagers. They gathered around, whispering and gossiping. Is that person really the guardian deity from the rumors? Another beast man took a sip of his drink, curling his lip in contempt. Are you guys joking with me? No matter how you look at him, he's just an inferior being. Amidst the lively atmosphere of the party, the whispering and gossiping still constantly rang out from the beast men who were sipping their drinks. He looks so scrawny, yet he claims to be a hero. However, the moment they saw Zack walking up with a very serious expression, their attitude changed instantly. Zack loudly scolded them. Just focus on staying alive. Stop complaining. The crowd frantically surrounded him, asking, are you all right, sir? At the same time, they turned around and bowed their heads to apologize to Jean. We are truly sorry for our disrespect, our deity. You, the guardian deity, are indeed incredibly extraordinary. Witnessing this scene, Jean could only let out a weary sigh at the villagers' 180-degree flip in attitude, which was completely different from their initial contempt. Right at that moment, the village chief and Hakama's grandmother approached Jean with an extremely respectful demeanor. The village chief bowed very low and sincerely said, respected elder, allow me to speak on behalf of the villagers. Once again, we would like to send you our deepest gratitude. He bitterly admitted that if it weren't for Jin's timely appearance, the entire Kodama village would have definitely been completely wiped out. Both of them expressed their desire to repay this immense favor. However, Jean only smiled calmly. Don't worry too much about it. However, if you guys really want to, I don't need material goods. What I need right now is information. Jean bluntly stated, I want to know in great detail about the current status of this world. The village chief and the old woman were slightly taken aback by his overly broad question. After a moment of contemplation, the old woman spoke up and suggested, "If that's the case, then it's best for you to take a trip to the imperial capital." She explained that the imperial capital was the seat of the king, the ruler of the mighty kingdom of Kamoja. It was a place where people from all over gathered, so they would certainly be very well informed about all the news of the outside world. Their Kodama village also frequently sent people there to trade their specialty silk from woodworms. The old woman honestly shared that although the road ahead was long and fraught with danger, she believed that with the capabilities of a guardian deity, it wouldn't be too big of a problem for Jean. Noticing that Jean was still hesitant, since he didn't know the way, she patted her granddaughter's head and offered, "Please let my granddaughter, Hakama, go with you as your guide. Either way, she has her own personal business to attend to in the capital." Seeing Jean wonder about the girl's personal business, the old woman revealed an important secret. "You must have witnessed it with your own eyes already. This child has the ability to use divine power." She stated that in the imperial capital, there was an academy specialized in training and helping humans develop this type of divine power. Although she had previously intended to give up due to the recent chaos, she still hoped Hakama could enroll as planned. Jean was slightly surprised to realize that schools still existed in this era. Right at that moment, a loud shout rang out, interrupting the conversation. "Hold on, everyone, wait a minute." Zack dismissed the idea and proudly declared, "I am the one who is much more worthy to guide the guardian deity." Seeing his grandmother query his business in the imperial capital, he confidently bragged, "Don't forget that I am destined to become a holy knight. I'm planning to join the ranks of the holy knights in the capital." However, the old woman immediately threw a bucket of cold water on him by reminding him that he couldn't even pass the entrance exam for the academy. Zack furiously yelled, "You old woman, what did you just say? Isn't it true that as long as you have divine power, you get accepted?" The old woman calmly explained that besides power, candidates also have to go through a written exam. Jean thought to himself, so that's how it is. Zack is basically an idiot, so he failed. The elder is too brutal, but also too accurate. He began to feel curious about the title of Holy Knight and the world out there. Meanwhile, in a deserted forest, an urgent report was delivered to the commander on horseback. "Huh? The giant monster was wiped out that quickly?" The commander skeptically questioned if that was the truth. The scout girl firmly confirmed it and stated that she was on her way back to report to the guild master. The commander pondered. He originally thought that without a holy knight, it would be impossible to take it down. So he had come here on his own without waiting for orders from the guild. To his surprise, the monster had already been taken care of by someone else. Right as the girl was laughing and talking about the coincidence, a hideous monster suddenly rushed out from behind, intending to attack her. Instantly, the commander swung his sword, delivering a fatal blow that tore the creature's body apart in the blink of an eye. Looking at the fallen corpse of the monster, he coldly remarked, "If what you said is true, then this matter is indeed getting interesting." He flashed a mysterious smile and asserted, "Not bad. Let's meet up and see just how good they are." The morning sunlight gently shone down on the peaceful village. Jean stood on the balcony, looking out into the distance and exclaiming, "What a wonderful early morning. The atmosphere is so fresh and pleasant." Looking at the lush green mountains and the winding river before him, he emotionally told himself that he never thought there would be a day he could witness this beautiful sight with his own eyes. In that quiet moment, Jin's heart suddenly clenched with longing for his old partner. If only Kagura could see this with me too. Right at that moment, Sandy timidly approached from behind, holding a bundle of clothes in his arms and calling out softly, Guardian deity, please put these clothes on." Jean quickly changed into the new outfit and together with everyone, prepared for the long journey. At the exit of the village, the old woman kindly instructed Hakama, "Make sure you fulfill your role as a guide very well." The girl politely replied, "I understand," standing next to her. Zack crossed his arms with a look of deep regret. He thought to himself that he had hoped he would learn many things by being by the guardian deity's side. However, the old woman immediately reminded him, "First of all, you need to focus on your studies." Having his sore spot touched, Zack grumbled, "You talk too much." Seeing this, Jean stepped forward, looked at Zack, and encouraged him, "You're Zack, right? Your movement techniques yesterday weren't bad at all." He smiled and added, "I'll be waiting for you at the imperial capital." Those words of recognition from the guardian deity made Zack deeply moved. He clenched his fist tightly and proudly vowed, I will definitely get there. I will put all my effort into studying." Meanwhile, Hakuma's father stepped forward to entrust his daughter to Jin. Guardian deity, please take care of Hakuma for me. He knelt down, hugged Hakuma tightly, and affectionately told her, Hakuma, as long as you take good care of your health, that's all that matters. After saying goodbye to the villagers, Jin slung his backpack over his shoulder and decisively declared, well then, I'm off. He waved goodbye to the villagers one last time, and along with Hakuma, officially set out on their journey. The two of them crossed dense forests, following a small stream flowing along the path. The journey continued to stretch across untouched wilderness, alongside endlessly long rivers. When twilight fell, they stopped to rest beside a magnificent waterfall cascading with white foam. The next morning, as the very first rays of sunlight broke through, Hakuma excitedly pointed forward, guiding Jin deep into the rolling mountain ranges toward the imperial capital. When night fell by the flickering campfire deep in the forest, Jin softly asked, how much further is it from here to the imperial capital? Hakuma replied, if we walk at a steady pace, we'll be there in 4 days. Jin silently assessed the situation. This distance is closer than he had imagined. Seeing Jin deep in thought, Hakuma curiously asked, why do you want to learn about this world so badly? Jin only smiled and replied, that's a secret. Leaving the girl wondering about his secrecy, Jin's gaze grew distant as he recalled Kagura's assertions that the corrupted ones were far from extinct. That was indeed the truth. They were still existing in this era. However, normally they could only multiply in heavily polluted environments. Reflecting on what had happened, Jin worried that surely some terrifying change was taking place, causing the monsters to appear even in clean places. The ancient ancestor has sensed foul play. Hakuma looked at Jin anxiously, then exclaimed, Guardian deity, your face looks so scary right now. Jin snapped out of it, softening his voice. Sorry, I'm sorry. I was just caught up thinking about some things. He told himself that at least humans were still living in this era without being controlled by the corrupted ones. First, he needed to look into it carefully, to see how people nowadays deal with them. As for researching the nature of the corrupted ones, that could wait until later. Breaking the silence, Hakuma hesitantly asked, by the way, what should I call you? Jin calmly replied, just call me Jin. Seeing the girl still respectfully calling him Lord Jin, he reminded her, just my name. Hearing Lord is tiring to my ears. Suddenly, the rapid thumping of horse hooves tore through the quiet night. A troop of fully armed cavalry unexpectedly appeared. The commander leading them in shiny armor spoke up. Apologies for interrupting your rest. Could I trouble you for a few minutes? Faced with the sudden appearance of the cavalry, Jin remained calmly seated by the fire and asked, who are you? The commander, with golden blonde hair and magnificent white armor, proudly introduced himself. We belong to the Holy Knights of the Imperial Capital. I am the captain of the 7th Division. My name is Auguste Anton. Hearing the title of Holy Knight, Jin softly repeated it, looking thoughtful. He glanced at the cavalryman behind and silently realized this was the force the old woman in the village had mentioned before. Seeing Jin still nonchalantly sitting and drinking water, without any intention of standing up to greet them, Karina, the female knight accompanying Auguste, immediately flew into a rage. She gritted her teeth and yelled, facing our captain, what kind of attitude is that? At the very least, stand up and greet him. What an insolent fellow. This girl must be a die-hard fan of the captain. Despite Karina burning with murderous intent and asserting to the captain that these were definitely suspicious individuals, Auguste maintained a calm composure. He ordered his subordinate to back down, then dismounted his horse, and politely spoke to Jin. Please forgive me for speaking while remaining on horseback. Do you mind talking with me for a moment? Jin stood up, his sharp, cold eyes looking straight at Auguste, and questioned him back about Karina's heavily implied words just now. Auguste tactfully spoke up, apologies. On behalf of my subordinate, I apologize for the rudeness just now. However, he also quickly got straight to the point. First of all, I need you to answer a few questions. Where did you two come from, and where is your next destination? Hakuma, currently kneeling on the ground, honestly replied. We came from Kodama village and are on our way to the imperial capital. Hearing the name of Kodama village, Auguste couldn't help but be surprised. Meanwhile, Karina still firmly believed that the two of them were lying. She jumped down from her horse, drew her sword, pointed it at Jin, and shouted furiously, there are absolutely no birth records mentioning an inferior race in Kodama village. Your cover is blown. You low-class race. Is this girl suffering from delusions of grandeur? Jin was slightly surprised, but silently admired the administrative management system of this world. The management is so strict, no different from modern times. However, August immediately spoke up to stop his subordinate. He pointed to the outfit Hakama was wearing and explained to Karina. The clothes that girl is wearing are a local specialty of the Kodama region. It's Kodama silk attire. Even in the capital, it is traded at a very high price. It is also bought and sold at very high prices, because it is considered an extremely high-end type of clothing. August noted that Kodama silk for young children is an extremely rare item to find on the market, so the fact that the girl comes from Kodama village is probably true. However, his gaze suddenly became sharp and full of suspicion as he looked toward Jean. August slowly drew his sword from its scabbard, the shiny tip of the blade pointing straight ahead. As for you, it is completely different. The clothes you are wearing look very strange. Which country do they originate from? He continued to question with a high-pressure tone, stating that along the route from Kodama village to the imperial capital, there have been consecutive robberies by bandit groups. They often utilize children to steal goods. A situation very similar to you two right now. August proudly asserted, robbers often pretend to be innocent people to ply their trade. Despite Hakama frantically explaining, we didn't do it. August still coldly declared, that will be for us to pass judgment on. Faced with the threat from the cavalryman, Hakama suddenly unleashed her power, a glowing blue electric current enveloping her body. August immediately narrowed his eyes in warning. Don't try to pull anything here. He was slightly surprised when sensing the energy flow from Hakama. To think that you actually possess divine power. You look like you have quite a bit of potential. Standing to the side, Jean silently observed the opponent and secretly evaluated. So this is a holy knight. I see. He is indeed very strong. August channeled his divine power into the sword, causing it to emit a brilliant, threatening light, pointing the tip of the blade straight at Jin's face. August demanded in a low voice, answer me right now. Where on earth do you come from? He delivered his final, stern threat. Depending on your testimony, it will decide whether I decapitate you right here on the spot or not. Jean remained standing motionless, his deep blue eyes staring piercingly at the opponent, without showing even a hint of fear. After taking a long, relaxed breath, Jean calmly gave his answer, from Kodama village. That's all. Why ask so much? The statement left Karina astonished, prompting her to exclaim, what? Then she immediately dismissed it with complete aversion. That is clearly a lie. However, contrary to his subordinate's impatience, August unexpectedly sheathed his sword and mused, I see. This sudden action left Karina completely bewildered, asking back, huh, Captain, why are you letting him go? August turned to look at Hakama and asked once more to confirm. You aren't lying, are you? With a steadfast gaze, the girl proudly asserted, Jean is truly the guardian deity of our Kodama village. The title guardian deity left August quite surprised. He softly repeated it skeptically, then muttered, so that's how it is. At this point, Jean finally spoke up, interrupting the opponent's train of thought. Are your questions finished? August nodded in admission. Yes, they are. He decisively mounted his horse. The captain signaled to the cavalry troop to prepare for departure and didn't forget to offer an apology. I also have matters that need to be dealt with. I hope you two can forgive my rudeness just now. Then August looked down at Jean from horseback and added, are you guys also heading toward the capital? Receiving a confirmation of that's right from Jean, he smiled meaningfully. I see. Then we will definitely cross paths again. Before leaving, August even generously offered, if you encounter any difficulties in the future, just come find me. Consider it an apology for today's incident. This offer left Karina so shocked that she couldn't believe her ears. See, Captain, are you being serious? Without waiting for his subordinate to regain her composure, August decisively spurred his horse to leave. Well then, allow us to stop troubling you two. Karina could only frantically run after him. Captain, wait for me. Jean stood quietly in the dark night, calmly watching the silhouettes of the cavalry troop gradually disappear. Karina yelled out in immense frustration as the whole team was on their way out. Why did you choose to retreat? No matter how you look at it, that low-class fellow is extremely suspicious. August still kept a thoughtful expression on his face. He softly repeated his subordinate's words, looking thoughtful. A low-class fellow, you say? August looked straight ahead and coldly admitted, it's not yet clear who the real prey is here. The statement left Karina astonished, prompting her to ask, what was that? Even Ria, the senior female knight traveling with them, nodded in agreement. That's exactly right. Karina couldn't help but be shocked. Huh? Are you taking his side too, sis? Ria looked at Karina with a serious expression and asked, Didn't you notice it? The massive gap in strength between us and that man. August recalled the moment of intense confrontation and revealed a terrifying truth. About 2 or 3 times, I intended to strike out to test him, but he managed to counter before I could even budge. Right at the moment August intended to draw his sword, Jean had reacted so fast that it completely overwhelmed him, leaving the captain unable to execute any offensive action even if he wanted to. Ria asked in horror to confirm. Captain, did you already use your divine power? When August confirmed that he did, he bitterly added, before I could do anything, my divine power was completely shut down. Karina completely froze when she heard the captain explain that. He had intended to use his power to suppress him just like he did with the little girl Hakama, but the spirits collectively refused to lend him their strength. When facing Jean, Ria also turned pale, admitting she fell into the exact same situation, leaving Karina trembling as she realized a terrifying truth was gradually unfolding. August thoughtfully noted, the discrepancy in holy power between both sides is just too massive. He thought to himself, that to be able to pull off such a miracle, perhaps in this entire Night Order, only the Grand Commander-in-Chief would have enough strength to match. Jean. Karina was still completely stunned at this point, trembling as she confessed. How come I didn't sense anything? August calmly explained that it was simply because that person is an anomalous existence. And besides, she had only just joined the squad. As the knights rode through the night, one member spoke up and asked, so, is the guy who killed the invading monster actually that person? August asserted that there was a high probability it was. Karina was still anxious and uneasy. Are we really just going to let them leave that easily? Isn't that way too dangerous? However, the captain had a different perspective. He believed that although their identity was unclear, they didn't seem to harbor any ill intent. For now, let's just quietly observe them. August decisively ordered, now, let's return to the capital. We handled the matter of the invading monster sooner than expected, but we cannot be absent any longer. He decided that they would hand over the bandit case to the guild to handle. August advised Karina that she should focus on cultivating her character rather than only worrying about power. Deep down, he still couldn't stop thinking about the guardian deity of Kodama village. Looking toward the brightly lit capital, August silently evaluated. If that person becomes our ally, they might just be the key to solving the most difficult problem that this kingdom is currently facing. The next morning, Jean and Hakama continued their journey under the brilliant sunlight. Jean smiled faintly and thought to himself, yesterday was quite an interesting encounter. Hakama curiously asked if all the knights in the capital possessed formidable power like them. Jean shook his head and replied, no, they are special cases. He explained that holy knights were an elite group, meticulously selected from the very best of the Night Order, and the 2 they met yesterday ranked among the most outstanding in that elite corps. Jean remarked, it's just that they utilize nano more skillfully, that's all. When Hakama asked blankly about spirit arts, Jean explained that it was the art of summoning spirits from the elements, a pure kind of power used to borrow strength from them. Jean silently realized that what the people of this era called spirits were actually the very nanoparticles he was completely familiar with. In their eyes, science now was no different from a far-fetched fantasy story. Watching Hakama walking happily, Jean suddenly recalled Zack's insult and wondered, and that business about an inferior race too? He chuckled softly and remarked, haha, it seems this era has countless different races existing together, doesn't it? Hakama nodded in confirmation and explained, according to her grandmother's words, that, due to their habitats shrinking a very long time ago, everyone's bodies had to gradually mutate to adapt to the places they lived. This created diverse races, such as merfolk or the insect tribe, that Jean was currently seeing in his imagination. This girl understands sociology so well. Jean pondered thoughtfully. If this evolution is due to environmental impacts, then it means there were people who survived from 100 million years ago and evolved into their current forms. He temporarily put aside his vague thoughts and asked Hakama directly, so those who didn't evolve are called inferior? The girl sadly confirmed, yes. That is exactly why society looks down on them, viewing them as backward people who refuse to adapt to the environment. Hakama revealed a heartbreaking truth that most of the people sold into slavery belong to the inferior race. Jean was appalled to realize that slavery still exists in this world. However, Hakama remained steadfast in her way of thinking. She believed that in reality, there wasn't any massive difference in treating people poorly, just because they are slightly different from the majority is completely wrong. Faced with that kind heart, Jean smiled and praised her. You really are a good child. Suddenly, a strange noise cut the conversation short. From the bushes, a faint voice rang out desperately. Help me. A young boy with blue hair, his body covered in wounds, staggered out and then collapsed right in front of them. Hakama frantically ran over to check on him. Are you okay? At that moment, Jin's gaze suddenly locked as he closely observed this boy's features. Looking at the bruised body and weak breathing of the person who had just fallen, Jin was silently astonished when looking at his ears. He was stunned to realize that those were not the beast tribe ears commonly seen in this era, but an incredibly strange pair of fully formed human ears. Hakama anxiously supported the gasping stranger, while Jin silently observed the bruises all over the opponent's body. He noticed that these injuries were actually very severe. Jin stepped closer, his hand emitting a gentle blue energy flow as he reassured. Just endure it a little. Let me treat your wounds right now. However, in just the blink of an eye, the injured individual's gaze suddenly became sharp and cold. She unexpectedly sprang up, using one hand to lock tightly around Hakama's neck and pressing the tip of a knife right against the girl's throat. She roared in threat. Absolutely do not move. If you even budge, I will take this brat's life instantly. What a deep performance. The Oscars are calling your name. Facing the perilous situation, Jin still maintained an astonishing level of composure. He softly uttered, so that's how it is. We carelessly fell into your trap. Looking at the fierce expression of the hostage-taker, Jin silently understood that this meant her accomplices were hiding right around here. From within the hazy mist, a figure gradually emerged, making Jin realize there really was someone capable of coordinating flawlessly with her. A bearded man, with a thuggish demeanor, stepped out and spoke up in praise. You've done a good job, Pawaru. You followed the orders extremely precisely. Jin quickly identified it. This was the active camouflage stealth technique, a technology using microscopic nanoparticles to collect environmental images and render the user invisible. Although its weakness is easily leaving traces when moving, this group of people had operated it extremely skillfully to surround him. The leader looked at Jin from head to toe, then uttered sarcastically, an inferior creature. Like you, yet you're wearing quite a dapper outfit. Which country do you come from? The leader pointed the tip of his sword straight at Jin's chest, threatening in a low voice. Stay calm, don't be foolish enough to move. You know full well what will happen if you dare to make a reckless move. Don't you? Behind them, Hakama was being restrained by Pawaru with a knife pressed against her neck. In desperation, the girl cried out, Help me, Lord Jin. But then she suddenly unleashed a brilliant blue divine power, making Pawaru gasp in astonishment. Seeing this, Jin frantically called her name, but Hakama could only tremble before the brutality of these people. However, Jin kept a sharp, cold expression as he lowered his voice and warned. That kind of power is inherently not meant to be used on humans. Surely you are aware of that too, right? Hakama muttered through her tears, but, meanwhile, the bandits were incredibly excited. A henchman laughed gleefully. Boss, this is a jackpot. I can't believe that brat actually possesses divine power. Another burly guy stepped closer to Jin, demanding to know if he possessed similar power. But Jin only coldly replied, Who knows, making him furiously shout, What? Without giving Jin time to react, the burly guy delivered a powerful kick to his back and sneered. Don't get cocky and smug, you low-class creature. Witnessing that scene, Hakama screamed out in pain. The leader quickly stopped him, fearing they would damage the valuable merchandise. But the henchman dismissively argued that an inferior being like Jin wouldn't fetch much money anyway. Doubts began to arise in the leader's mind. Could not understand why a bunch of lowly beings could hold such divine power. Hakama was horrified to realize that these were the human traffickers, the notorious bandits that the Holy Knight had previously mentioned. The leader stepped closer, his hand emitting threatening, bright yellow electric sparks. Go to sleep nicely, you'll be valuable merchandise in a bit. He decided to use his power to force them into silence. Hakama despairingly realized that if they let themselves get caught like this, both of them would definitely be sold into slavery. The electric current from the leader's hand closed in on the girl's face, ready to plunge everything into darkness. Hakama snapped out of her unconscious state due to Jin's urgent calling. Hakama, wake up quickly. Seeing Jin right beside her, the girl frantically asked, Lord Jin? Jin anxiously checked her condition. Are you hurt anywhere? Hakama reassured him that she was completely unharmed, but what was more important right now was the situation they were both in. Jean looked around the cold iron bars and wondered, where on earth are we locked up? He realized that this was indeed the hideout of the ones who had attacked them. In the distance, countless iron cages were also currently holding innocent people who had expressions of utter despair. Jean thoughtfully observed, it seems the other people captured by them are all being locked up together in this spot. Seeing Jean in a state where he was only wearing shorts, Hakama shyly asked, but why are you currently in such a naked state like that, Lord Jean? Jean nonchalantly explained, they stripped all my clothes off because they thought that outfit was too strange. Luckily, they still left me my underwear. The ancient ancestor is truly optimistic in any adversity. Hakama could only be left speechless at his calmness. Why are you so unbothered? Jean clicked his tongue and brushed it off, since after all, for most of his past life, he had spent it completely shirtless. Inside the laboratory, the girl quickly changed the subject. Let's put that matter aside for a moment. Why didn't you strike back at that time? She believed that with Jin's actual strength, he was more than capable of taking down those human traffickers easily. Faced with Hakama's question, Jean only kept silent, his deep eyes full of calculations. Suddenly, the dry sound of a door opening echoed from afar, along with the urging of a stranger. Hurry up and wrap this thing up to get it over with. The cell door swung wide open. Puwaru walked in with a tray of bread in her hands. Seeing that both of them were awake, she coldly said, so you've been fully conscious for a while now, huh? Hakama roared in indignation. You. Facing that anger, Puwaru just silently set the food down and uttered somberly, I don't care if you harbor hatred toward me, because I have never dared to hope that. Puwaru lowered her head, her voice tinged with melancholy. I would receive forgiveness in the first place. Self-delusion? Plot twist incoming. Standing inside the iron bars, Hakama gritted her teeth and gripped the cage tightly. Her eyes filled with rage. Jean smirked faintly and calmly remarked, you really are far too merciful. His words left Puwaru stunned. Merciful? Jean silently evaluated. A true villain would never waste time worrying about whether they are hated or forgiven like that, or something along those lines. Jean silently stood up, putting the food tray aside. He decisively declared, all right, let's get started. Before the astonished eyes of Puwaru and Hakama, Jean used his bare hands to tightly grip the iron bars of the cage. Channeling his strength, he snapped them as easily as breaking dry twigs. Puwaru turned pale, unable to believe her eyes, as she saw this man step out of the prison cell in such an unbothered manner. Approaching Puwaru, Jean said in a low voice, I have been patiently waiting for you. Around here, there won't be anyone who can eavesdrop on our conversation. Puwaru asked tremblingly, waiting for me? Without letting her regain her composure, Jean got straight to the point. The person who matters most to you. Where are they currently being locked up by them? The question hit the bullseye, making Puwaru panic. How on earth did you know about that? Jean nonchalantly explained that it was just his speculation. He admitted that initially, she had even fooled him, because the bruises on her body were completely real. However, Jean asserted that even if they are evil, they wouldn't beat their own comrade this ruthlessly, just to utilize them. Because of that, he had seen through the situation early on. Jean realized that she was being threatened with physical violence to force her to comply with their demands. Puwaru lowered her head, her shoulders trembling violently from having her painful secret exposed. Finally, she faintly admitted in despair, my younger brother, he was taken away by them. Puwaru choked up as she continued to recount her family's tragedy through her sobs. As for my parents, both of them were brutally murdered by those bastards. The horrific memory of her parents being murdered flashed back, making her unable to hold back her tears of pain. She cried out in desperation, that's why I am forced to protect my little brother's life at all costs. That is the sole reason I did it. Such a tragic past. I feel so sorry for her. Witnessing the young girl's anguish, Hakama could only stand frozen in sorrow. Jin's gaze at this moment suddenly darkened. He growled, with murderous intent surging, they truly are trash. The ancient ancestor has turned on absolute eradication mode. Seeing Jean still remaining so incredibly calm, Hakama curiously asked, so did you purposely let the bandits capture and imprison you in order to rescue them? Jean did not deny it. That was also part of the plan. But evil people are inherently very stubborn and persistent. They are no different from stubborn grease stains. Faced with Hakama's bewilderment regarding the concept of grease stains, Jean explained that if even a single one is allowed to escape, they will quickly multiply again and continue to cause other disasters for innocent people. Outside in the corridor, a beastman guard heard a strange noise and stopped to investigate with a highly suspicious look. Before the guard could even comprehend, Jean coldly declared, "Therefore, if I have decided to destroy them." Instantly, he delivered a lightning-fast kick, sending the heavy wooden door flying straight out and crushing the guard against the opposite wall, knocking him unconscious immediately. Jean stepped out of the prison cell with an air of majesty. He proudly asserted, "You must pull up the weeds by the roots, leaving no trace behind. They must be wiped out in the most thorough and ruthless manner. The ancient ancestor is a genuine cleaner, so cool." 1 billion years ago, in the midst of a civilized era with skyscrapers and an intricate network of light highways, a young boy with a face smudged with dirt silently observed the world and told himself, "I was the same way," looking at a large screen praising a hero who once dismantled a notorious drug cartel. He silently affirmed, "I have always yearned to execute justice." However, he soon realized one thing: a world that still stands in need of justice is actually just full of scum like humanity, and they are multiplying everywhere. Facing a thuggish man who was tightly gripping his collar, the young boy only thought to himself, "If I could have lived a normal life, that would indeed have been the most ideal thing. But the circumstances under which I grew up simply did not allow that to happen." Therefore, he chose the path of violence to solve everything. In just the blink of an eye, he snapped the arm of the person restraining him, leaving the henchman around him able to do nothing but watch in sheer terror. With his glowing blue eyes full of murderous intent, he declared, "Wipe out these pests right now," then rushed in to trample those scumbags without a shred of mercy. He didn't just defeat them, he wanted to destroy them completely. Just like that, Jean single-handedly wiped out every piece of scum blocking his path. He sat quietly atop a mountain of defeated foes. Until one day, someone came looking for him and told him, "You were inherently born into the wrong world." That person was Kagura, who reached out a hand and opened up a new destiny for him. Back to reality. Even without any weapons or armor on him, Jean still exuded an overwhelming, murderous aura as he casually dragged the bandit along the floor like a piece of ragged junk. Witnessing that scene, a squad of beastman guards frantically blocked the path and shouted, "Stop right there." However, all of them were quickly taken down in the blink of an eye. One guy lay flattened on the floor, groaning, "What on earth do you want?" Another slouched against the wall, trembling, unable to believe his eyes. "How did you manage to infiltrate all the way in here?" In response to their terror was only a cold, mysterious smile from Jean. He swung his leg, delivering a lightning-fast kick that sent a guard flying into midair. Jean moved as fast as a phantom, continuously unleashing powerful strikes that left the bandits no time to react. One guy had his body tightly gripped by him in utter shock. The remaining ones could only stand by and watch their comrade get overwhelmed in helplessness and fear. The cornered guard, while trembling, screamed out in desperation, "What kind of monster are you?" Jean still loomed forward with his robust physique, leaving the remaining ones to scream in terror when facing his unstoppable power. A blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the dungeon, leaving the imprisoned people shocked and trembling. Pawaru turned pale, thinking to herself, "That scream is..." Unable to hide her astonishment, she turned to ask Hakama, "What kind of person is your companion anyway? Have you never seen the ancient ancestor unleash his full power before?" Hakama proudly replied, "He is a guardian deity." Faced with Pawaru's astonishment, the girl once again asserted, "That's right, a deity. Just leave it to Lord Jean. He will handle it perfectly." Hakama urged Pawaru to act quickly. "For now, let's just do as Lord Jean said and get everyone out of here." Though still full of doubt, asking if they all could truly escape safely, Pawaru anxiously brought up the leader's power. "But that guy, he possesses an immensely abundant source of holy power. There's no way he can defeat him with just muscle power alone." However, right at this moment, the leader himself was trembling, backing away, and pleading. In utter desperation, Wait a minute." Jean loomed forward, restraining a guard with one hand, and coldly asked the leader, "What is it that you desire so badly?" "Money, right?" The leader stammered, No." Then he quickly put on a deeply cowardly, placating smile. He pointed his hand toward the iron cage holding Pawaru's little brother, and bargained, "If you like slaves, just take them, as long as you spare my life." Jean stood frozen, his blue eyes burning with intense murderous intent at the human trafficker's disgusting offer. Looking at the leader sitting flat on the ground beside his subordinates, who no longer had the capacity to resist, Jean asked in a low voice, "Are you finished saying your last words?" The leader trembled violently, drenching in sweat, as he witnessed Jin's highly threatening presence. He panicked, wondering, what the hell is going on here? Why is my holy magic completely useless? The leader looked up at Jean, with eyes full of terror and uttered in hopelessness. This guy, the leader, trembled and backed away, his mind constantly screaming in horror. What kind of monstrous energy is he holding? About to kick the bucket and still asking questions. Jean loomed forward with an expression of utter contempt. You're just a half-baked villain. The truly formidable ones would choose to run away immediately. As for your type, you always start by running your mouth to belittle your opponent, and always firmly believe that you will definitely win. And then, the moment you begin to taste defeat, you start begging miserably. Having his true colors exposed, the leader gritted his teeth in rage. Drenched in sweat. Damn it. He suddenly sprang up, frantically rushing toward the back of the room. If that's how it is, then I have no other choice, he screamed frantically, while his trembling hands gripped a lever. Not yet. This isn't over yet. The moment the lever was pulled down, a dry clanking sound rang out, and a heavy iron door slowly opened, revealing a massive dark shadow lurking behind it. The leader triumphantly declared, I specially acquired this thing, at someone's request. A mutated, gargantuan monster with bumpy purple skin and bulging muscles stepped out, crushing the stone floor beneath its feet. The most disgusting part was a mouth full of sharp teeth, located right in the middle of its chest, emitting a glowing red murderous aura. The leader laughed triumphantly. If sweet talk doesn't work, then so be it. I will leave you broken and miserable. At its master's command, the monster roared frantically, swinging its colossal arm to deliver a thunderous blow right down on Jin's position. A loud explosion echoed, but instead of being crushed, Jean used his bare hands to completely block the monster's 1,000-pound punch. The colliding forces shook the entire space, but Jean still stood firm as a mountain. Witnessing this unbelievable sight, the leader could only gape, his eyes wide with shock. Whwa! The ancient ancestor is so overpowered. Are your eyes popping out yet? Amidst the smoke and dust, Jean calmly looked straight at him and affirmed, as you can see, I was inherently born with an extraordinary body. Jean braced himself, blocking the monster's punch, silently noting that compared to other normal humans, it seemed he possessed significantly more muscle fibers. He delivered a kick that sent it flying back. Looking at the hideous creature roaring in front of him, he uttered softly with complete disdain. Is that all? Gathering his full power, he declared. Then I shall use holy power as well. He unleashed a massive pillar of blue light that engulfed the monster, completely obliterating it in the blink of an eye. The leader collapsed onto the ground, trembling and unable to believe his eyes when seeing Jean could also use divine power in such an overwhelming manner. Jean loomed close, standing proudly in front of him and coldly speaking up. So now, what do you plan to do next? The leader was dripping with sweat, his face distorted from absolute terror. He stammered in desperation. He clasped his hands together, desperately pleading, with a cowardly appearance. Could you turn a blind eye and spare me this time? So arrogant at first, now down on his knees. In response to that plea, was only a cold and decisive answer. I cannot. Without a shred of hesitation, Jean delivered a thunderous punch straight to the leader's face, crushing the final piece of arrogance of this trash human trafficker. After cleaning up the trash, Jean quickly found his familiar outfit again and softly uttered, All right, got my clothes back. He walked toward the iron cages, holding the poor people, his gaze softening as he spoke words of reassurance. I'm sorry, but please bear with it a little longer. I will get everyone out of this place shortly. Seeing the hopeful smiles of the children, Jean understood that he couldn't just rescue the people and leave. He approached the leader's desk and began flipping through documents with a serious expression. However, before that, there are a few things I need to investigate and clarify. It won't be of any use if I don't collect evidence of their crimes. Suddenly, he paused upon spotting a strange piece of paper. Oh, this thing looks extremely suspicious. Jean intently stared at the unfamiliar characters on the page and thought to himself, I see. But immediately after that, he showed a look of bewilderment, with question marks popping up around his head. What on earth are these lines writing about anyway? I don't understand a single word. He sighed, realizing that he was completely illiterate. In this new era, I'll probably have to ask Hakama to teach me how to read the language of this era. Stepping over the leader lying miserably on the floor, Jean still couldn't stop pondering the true purpose of these human traffickers. Even so, what do they intend to do after capturing the corrupted ones? To find the answer, he placed his hand on a physical surface, activating a blue light from advanced nanotechnology. It's time to find out the truth. I will proceed to access the footage from the nanos currently floating around here. A series of virtual screens appeared before Jin's eyes, reproducing past visual data. Any footage from this past week should definitely still be saved in here. In the recorded video segment, a man with a luxurious appearance was bowing respectfully and asking a noble figure, "But sir, what do you plan to do with a large catch like this?" The person standing opposite only coldly replied, "That is not a matter you need to concern yourself with." The man in the recorded video segment flashed a mysterious smile, his eyes gleaming with a sharp, cold look as he made a meaningful declaration. "However, I think I will reveal one thing to you. There's about to be some fun in this country." Jin silently watched the entire conversation through the virtual screen, his face becoming extremely serious at the premonitions of a major event about to unfold. Leaving the dark basement, they entered a bustling town with high-rise buildings of classical architecture. A blue-haired boy with a disheveled appearance frantically ran over and cried out in joy, "Sister!" Realizing that it was her younger brother, Pawaru emotionally called out the boy's name, Nino. The two siblings hugged each other tightly after so many days apart. Nino muttered through his tears, "This is wonderful, thank goodness." Pawaru turned to Jin, bowing her head to express her deep gratitude. "Sir, thank you so very much." Facing that respect, Jin only calmly replied, "I'm just a passerby." He cast his eyes to observe the surroundings and suddenly asked, "By the way, let me ask." Jin pointed toward the people in red uniforms who were currently surrounding and escorting the bandits. He wondered whether they were the subordinates of this region's lord. Hakama promptly explained that those were people from the guild, whom she herself had called for assistance. The girl pointed toward a man with a pair of horns, of large ram horns, who was engrossed in taking notes, and stated that he was indeed the guild master of this town's guild. Noticing Jin's presence, the guild master immediately approached with a look of surprise and asked, "Was it you who stepped up to handle this matter?" Jin decisively nodded in confirmation. "That's right." The guild master with the ram horns respectfully bowed and introduced himself. "My name is Padaraku, the guild master of the guild. Please accept our most sincere gratitude for lending your assistance." Nice horns, but he's already afraid of the ancient ancestor. However, hidden behind his polite exterior, Padaraka couldn't help but be astonished as he observed Jin. He silently evaluated to be able to confront that many enemies without getting a single scratch. Judging by his appearance, he looks like an inferior race, but intuition tells me that he cannot possibly be an ordinary fellow. Padaraku explained that recently, the guild had been under immense pressure from countless requests to eliminate this bandit group due to the heavy damage they caused. Hearing that, Jin wondered, "Lords aren't the police." Padaraku hastily corrected him. "A lord does not possess authority to that high of a degree." He stated that the only ones with the authority to handle criminals of this kind are the guild members, who have sworn loyalty to the king. Even if the lord of this region, Lord Sabian, were to break the law, the guild is still obligated to report it to the king, though he believed that was highly unlikely to happen. Jin silently compared, in 22nd century terms, a lord is like a mayor, and the guild is similar to the police. However, the image of an ambitious person named Sabian still kept Jin mindful. He took out a scroll and asked, "This is a document that I obtained from their people. Will it be of any help to you?" The moment he saw the contents inside, Padaraka gasped in shock. "This is..." He trembled, realizing that this was indeed the list of individuals who had conducted underground transactions with the bandits. With this ironclad evidence, the guild could capture the entire ring in one single sweep. Jin then drove the question straight to the point. "Is the name of the local lord included in there by any chance?" Seeing Padaraku freeze, Jin immediately smoothed it over. "Don't take my joke just now seriously, sir." Padaraku asserted that it wasn't there, but deep down, Jin began to see through the whole situation. "I see. He really is a high-level villain. For now, there isn't much more I can do." He cast his eyes toward the siblings Pawaru and Nino, pondering the fate of the newly liberated slaves. Padaraku stated that the guild would take responsibility for returning those whose identities could be verified back to their hometowns. However, for those with untraceable origins like the two siblings, the guild genuinely couldn't offer any further assistance. Jin looked at the siblings Pawaru and Nino, then lost himself in thought. If I remember correctly, these two children have lost both their father and mother. He turned to ask Padaraku if there were any care facilities for orphans around here, but received the blunt answer that there were absolutely none. The guild master sighed and explained that they could only act as an intermediary to help find employment. But since these two children belong to a low-class race, finding a workplace will be incredibly difficult. Pataraku asserted that no place would accept them for work, leaving the siblings' future looking bleak. What kind of strange guild is this anyway? Looking at the sad faces of the children, Jean suddenly had an idea and asked, "There's a great workplace available. Want to go?" Pawaru and Nino immediately agreed with eyes sparkling with hope, causing Hakama to ask in surprise if Jean already had a specific place targeted in mind. Jean smirked mysteriously and affirmed, "That's right." He recalled Captain August's previous offer. "If you encounter any difficulties in the future, just come look for me." With a cold smile, Jean said to himself, "There's definitely an extremely ideal place for the two of them." At that exact same time, at the magnificent mansion of August in the capital of the Cosmosia Kingdom, the Night Order had just returned after a long journey, under the brilliant morning sunlight. As they rode their horses into the mansion's courtyard, August suddenly flinched in utter shock, as if he had just sensed a bad omen. Faced with the anxiety of the female knight Rhea, he could only utter that he suddenly felt a chill down his spine for no apparent reason. Stepping down from his horse with a majestic air, August decisively declared that the long expedition had officially come to an end. He expressed his gratitude and requested everyone to take a very good rest. August stepped into the magnificent mansion. Amidst the warm welcome of the servants, they bowed in unison. "Welcome back, Master." August, the moment he handed over his luggage to the butler, hastily asked about the situation. "Are there any new reports?" Noticing the embarrassed expression and the dripping sweat of the butler, he paused with suspicion. "What's making you so tense?" The butler bowed his head to apologize for having to trouble him right when he had just returned from a tiring trip, but August only calmly replied, "Don't worry about that," and then listened to the confidential information being reported. From the high balcony, a woman with a sharp, cold gaze was silently observing their conversation. After listening to it, August pondered for a while, then nodded slightly. "I see. Thank you for the report." August lowered his head, deeply troubled. He realized that the actual situation was much worse than what he had imagined. He wondered in shock why an invader could appear and attack right inside the capital, a place that was supposed to be strictly guarded. Suspicion began to arise. August believed that surely someone had intentionally let that monster in to cause chaos. What made him most suspicious was the strict prohibition preventing anyone without authorization from stepping foot into Haenix Academy. August told himself that he needed to quickly find trustworthy allies for himself to deal with the anonymous forces. Meanwhile, at a bustling street corner, Jean, along with Hakama and the Pawaru siblings, were waving goodbye to Guild Master Pataraku, waving goodbye to the Pataraku guild leader, along with the guild staff, getting ready to head toward the capital. The ancient ancestor is taking his disciples along to join the party. Guys, 3 days have passed since the operation to wipe out the bandits, and the whole group is still diligently on their journey, heading toward the capital. Along the way, Pawaru anxiously asked, "Are you sure there will really be a suitable job for someone like me in this capital city?" Jean smiled faintly to reassure her. "Don't worry too much. You already know how to read and write, don't you? Furthermore, you even have very good calculation skills. You will definitely find a workplace." "Yes, sir," he advised her to just have faith in her own abilities. Pawaru brightly replied, "Yes, sir." Suddenly, Hakama cried out in excitement, "Lord Jean, look! We've arrived." In the distance, the capital of the kingdom came into view in all its magnificence, under the sunlight, making Jean gasp in astonishment. The capital is insanely grand. Stepping into the city, Jean couldn't help but be amazed by the bustling and lively atmosphere of this place. Hakama explained that the capital inherently relies heavily on imported goods, so products from all over the regions flood into here. Even the villagers of Kodama also frequently make the arduous journey here to display and sell their specialties, which Jean had also heard about before. Jean silently evaluated that this was indeed an interesting place, with countless different races and civilizations converging, from the insect tribe to even the merfolk tribe. He noticed it makes sense that a diverse culture is thriving. This city is not only clean, but the security system also seems very reliable. However, Jin's gaze suddenly turned sharp and cold when he realized the dark side behind that glamorous appearance. Were miserable. People had to huddle together in the damp, dark corners of the capital. Jean observed the hidden corners of the capital and thought to himself, perhaps every era will inherently have its own problems. He turned to ask Hakama, "When do you start school?" The girl quickly replied, "It's next week." Jean nodded slightly, calculating. "So we still have a bit of time to prepare." Hakama further explained that enrollment will be carried out right after the examinations end. From behind, a noble lady with silky blonde hair was secretly observing them through her handheld fan. She looked at Jean with eyes full of utter disdain and thought to herself, wanting to register at Haenix Academy? A kid like that? And even with a man from a low-class race too? When twilight fell, the whole group stopped at a spacious inn within the city. The moment they entered the room, Nino and Hakama excitedly jumped up in joy. Hakama breathed a sigh of relief. Getting to lie on a soft bed is so great. Jean sat down on the bed and softly replied, "Yeah, that's right." He thoughtfully put his hand to his chin and pondered, "Now that the whole group has finally set foot at our destination, the capital of the kingdom, what should my next step be, I wonder?" Jean looked at the bag of gold coins in his hand and told himself, "No matter what, I still need money to be able to survive in this era." He recalled the reward money received from wiping out the bandits, but also clearly understood that amount of money could by no means be spent forever. Not to mention Jean still had to share a portion with the slaves, and he was deeply concerned about the issue of finding stable employment for the Poirot siblings. The silhouette of Captain Auguste briefly flashed in his mind as he thought, meeting that young man would be the quickest solution, but without someone to introduce me, I'm afraid it will be hard to meet him right away. Jean sat quietly in the room, his hand propping up his chin as he calculated. Perhaps I should first conduct a thorough investigation on the corrupted ones. In this era, he felt uneasy, knowing there are people plotting to utilize them for their own dark purposes. To Jean, the corrupted ones are an extremely horrific threat. They absolutely cannot be allowed to run rampant freely any further. He looked out at the brilliant scenery of the capital and made up his mind. I won't let that scum cause chaos again. Jean inquired of Hakama about what people in this country usually do whenever they want to learn about or research a certain matter. The girl lay down leisurely and explained that they would look for a tutor or seek out various books to read. However, because books here are very expensive, even back in Kodama village in the past, everyone had to share a few scarce books that were very hard to obtain. Hakama's eyes suddenly lit up as she mentioned a large library in the capital, where you can absolutely go to look up information. Hearing that, Jean was silently delighted because if he made good use of that place, who knows, I might find clues about the research facilities that Kagura left behind. However, Jin's hope was quickly extinguished by a female librarian's polite refusal. She was extremely sorry, but asserted that he was not permitted to use the facilities here. She explained that books are considered national property, so they cannot allow just anyone to freely enter. Access is restricted exclusively to students of recognized ability, instructors, and the nobility living within the capital. Jean could only stand frozen before the harsh reality. Hakama even delivered a follow-up, shocked by reminding him, "In the first place, you don't even know how to read characters, do you?" Jean bit his lip and told himself, That's right. I still don't know how to read." Although recently he had been instructed by everyone and had diligently practiced writing on the ground, Jean understood that he still needed a bit more time before he could become fluent in this language. Standing in the middle of the bustling streets, he put his hand to his forehead, sighing deeply and pondering what he should do next. In a hidden corner, two strangers in hooded cloaks were secretly trailing him and the children. They confirmed that Jean was indeed the one belonging to the inferior race traveling with those kids. One guy suddenly approached from behind and spoke up in a highly provocative tone. "Hey, got some free time? Want to have a little brawl?" The moment Jean turned around, the beast man with wolf ears unleashed a thunderous punch straight at his face. However, Jean just slightly tilted his head and used one hand to effortlessly block the attack. He coldly repeated, "Is hitting like this considered a little?" Then looked straight at the opponent with a highly pressuring gaze. Jean sardonically added that their way of greeting was indeed very special, making him have to take back his comment from earlier about the security here being very good. Jean effortlessly used one hand to block the punch of the gray-haired beast man, making him exclaim in surprise, "You've got it all wrong. Your instincts are quite sharp too, pal." Right in the middle of the bustling city, a wave of energy violently erupted, causing the surrounding citizens to flee in panic. Witnessing this scene, Hakama was completely shocked. Daring to use divine power right in the center of the city like this? Facing the attacker, Jean coldly asked, "Could you tell me what your purpose is?" The beastman smirked and replied provocatively. There is someone who finds the sight of you guys eyesores. Jean glanced at the opponent and silently deduced. So someone hired them to come here. However, instead of worrying, he slightly flashed a calculating smile. Because everything was playing out exactly as he had hoped. The gray-haired beastman continued to utter threats. Get the hell out of here right now, or die. He and his accomplice laughed gleefully, but Jean only nonchalantly replied. When the situation truly becomes dangerous, I will consider that. This bastard then swung his fist to attack. But his hand was already gripped by Jean. The punk was bewildered. What the hell? His body was sent face first into the dirt immediately. Witnessing his comrade get taken down, the red-haired beastman roared in rage. You bastard. He channeled all his divine power into his hands, creating a blazing shroud of firepower, and rushed straight toward Jean. Yet, Jean still maintained a calm expression. He used a nano-shield to effortlessly block it. Before the astonished eyes of the attacker, Jean suddenly closed the distance and used one hand to tightly choke his neck, lifting him high up into midair, rendering him completely incapable of resisting. Jean looked straight into the terrified eyes of the red-haired guy and coldly declared, If you want to fight me, go train more, kid. He tightened his grip further, making the opponent choke, and growled. But that's under the condition that you still have enough guts to challenge me again. The red-haired beastman trembled in despair, silently realizing with horror that the man in front of him could by no means be an ordinary low-class race. Right at that moment, a highly commanding voice rang out, interrupting the brawl. That's enough. Everyone freeze, don't move. A female knight with long brown hair tied up in a high ponytail stepped out from the crowd. She grumbled irritably, seriously. No peace even on my day off. She proudly reprimanded the troublemakers. Daring to pick a fight and brawl right in the middle of the street like this? I will throw all of you into the dungeon. Brace yourselves. Witnessing the intervention of the authorities, Jean slightly smiled with satisfaction because his plan to cause a little chaos to attract attention had finally yielded a good result. The moment she clearly saw Jin's face, the female knight's expression suddenly changed. She pointed her hand at him and shouted in sheer astonishment. You're that person from the low-class race from the other day? She proudly reprimanded him with a face full of antipathy. You're quite bold, aren't you? The moment you set foot in the capital, you've already provoked a fight. Brandishing her weapon, Karina uttered words of contempt. As expected, an inferior kind will always be inferior. There are matters where you should know your boundaries. What is permitted and what is not. This attitude urgently needs some rehabilitation. Right when she was about to press the matter further, a girl with long rabbit ears suddenly spoke up to intervene. Excuse me, let me interrupt for a moment. The girl explained that she happened to pass by and witnessed the entire incident. Her gaze turned serious as she asserted to the female knight. These people were actually the ones unexpectedly attacked by those guys. Therefore, I believe that action was completely in self-defense. The sudden vindication left Karina dumbfounded. Freezing on the spot for a few seconds, she looked at the beastman lying motionless on the ground and silently evaluated. Man, he looks very familiar. Karina approached the group of people who had been taken down. She narrowed her eyes and questioned. And you guys too. You are students from Haenix Academy, aren't you? Recognizing the identity of the aggressors, she could only hold her head in exasperation. As expected, just as I calculated. I hope that young lady has nothing to do with this matter. Jean was slightly curious. Which young lady? However, Karina quickly issued the order to escort the group away and coldly cut him off. Take them away quickly. That matter is our internal business. You don't need to concern yourself with it. What a blatant cover-up, everyone. Jean watched the female knight's figure and wondered. So it turns out holy knights also have to go on patrol? I thought that was a duty for the guild side. Karina explained as she walked. That because the capital is too vast. They are merely lending a hand to maintain public order. She even honestly revealed her true purpose. To tell you the truth, I only happened to pass by here while looking for some snacks. However, deep down, Karina couldn't help but shudder as she glanced at Jean, and silently admitted, but that guy truly possesses formidable strength. Conversely, Jean also silently evaluated that the students he had just faced were by no means ordinary. Either, Karina intended to turn around and leave, but didn't forget to leave a warning. Don't cause trouble in this capital. Instantly, Jean called out to stop her. Hold on a moment. If you don't mind, I want you to lead me to a certain place. The unexpected request left the female knight completely astonished. You want me to take you to a certain place? The destination Jean targeted was indeed the magnificent mansion of August. That very same night, sitting opposite the holy knight captain, Jean interlocked his fingers and went straight to the point. Please hire us. Before August's stunned face, he leisurely repeated, when we met, didn't you tell me to come look for you if I needed help? August narrowed his eyes to observe and commented, why are you bringing a whole family along this time? Jean calmly explained, that was just an unexpected occurrence. He stated that the group had run straight into the very bandits that August had previously warned about, and since I saw these people were being held captive, I stepped in to rescue them. August frantically asked about the fate of the bandits. Jean only softly replied, I taught them a proper lesson. After that, I handed the rest over to the guild to handle. The captain lost himself in thought, unable to hide his horror at the thought of a single person. Jean could take down an entire notorious bandit group. He wondered why Jean decided to help these children. Jean looked at the siblings, Pawaru, and replied, they have no relatives left. They are the ones you people refer to as the inferior race. I thought I should at least try to find them a job. But August was still not entirely without skepticism. I don't think it's your responsibility to look after them, though. Jean asserted that it was simply his working principle. He proudly declared, whatever the reason may be, I save their lives, and I don't do anything half-heartedly. I will take responsibility for this matter until the very end. The highly courageous assertion from Jean left August and Karina completely frozen in astonishment, while the Pawaru siblings beamed with a happy smile, because they had found a true pillar of support. August nodded, accepting Jin's offer. All right. The two of them can stay and work right here at this mansion. Hearing the good news, Pawaru joyfully cried out in excitement. Is that true, sir? However, August's gaze suddenly turned sharp and serious. He looked straight at Jean and put forward an exchange condition. However, I have a condition attached. I want you to take on the role of an instructor. The exceedingly unexpected offer left Jean utterly astonished. An instructor? In just the blink of an eye, the siblings Pawaru and Nino had changed into brand new maid and butler uniforms, looking extremely neat and radiant. Jean crossed his arms, observing the two siblings' new appearance, and softly commented, the kids look quite dapper. The two siblings immediately bowed their heads very low to express their sincere gratitude. Lord August, we are immensely grateful to you. August calmly replied that they didn't need to thank him. Then he turned around to strictly give instructions to the servants in the mansion. I place my trust in you two regarding their training. You must absolutely not have a discriminatory attitude, just because they belong to the inferior race. Captain August is the perfect standard of a righteous guy. Faced with their master's ironclad command, the servants could only bow their heads in obedience. As the whole group began to leave to execute the next plan, Pawaru and Nino stood from afar, waving goodbye with deep emotion. Thank you very much, sir. Walking beside the captain, Jean did not hesitate to go straight to the point. What's next? This offer to become an instructor. You definitely have some hidden motive, don't you? August smiled, admitting that Jin's sharp perception would be of great help. To the job. His gaze grew deep as he confessed. Although I'm not yet clear about your background, I want to place my faith, but we want to place our trust that you are the right person for me to ask this favor of. August looked toward the magnificent architecture of Haenix Academy, which was shrouded in the night, and revealed the true mission. I want you to carry out a mission to conduct an undercover investigation inside Haenix Academy. Jean looked slightly thoughtful and wondered, what on earth is this about? August explained in a low voice about the turbulent political situation. This kingdom is about to fall into chaos. Seeing Jean wondering about the lack of governance, August bitterly revealed the truth. The king is gravely ill and does not have much time left. Because of that, the war to inherit the succession has already begun unfolding secretly in the dark. He emphasized that the most difficult problem lay in the fact that there are dark forces who possess absolutely no authority over the throne, yet are currently eyeing and plotting to seize this entire kingdom. August revealed in a low voice that those people are utilizing the invaders unlawfully, dragging even innocent people into their malicious plot. Jean silently listened and understood in his mind that the local lord from before was not the only one to be wary of. Dangerous individuals like that are still hiding and operating stealthily right in the heart of the bustling capital. August asserted that the whole group needed to quickly find their lair to prevent future disasters. Jean cast his eyes at the captain and asked, And the most suspicious location is Haenix Academy, isn't it? August smiled slightly in confirmation. Exactly so. August approached a room, knocked on the door, and decisively stepped inside. I'm coming in. He stated that there would be a guide to help Jean infiltrate inside the academy in the most smooth manner. Lord August introduced. Let me introduce you to my younger sister currently studying at Haenix, Milia Anton. Sitting on the sofa with a glamorous demeanor, Milia half closed her fan, casting a sharp, cold gaze toward the group that had just entered. Seeing her brother accompanied by strangers, she softly uttered, "This is, brother?" With this look, a war is about to break out, everyone. The moment she saw Jean, Milia could not hide her disdain. Don't tell me you plan to entrust the secret mission that you mentioned the other day to this inferior guy? August immediately yelled to correct his sister's attitude. Milia, you are being truly disrespectful. Yet, the young lady still stubbornly replied, what's disrespectful about it? Isn't the very existence of the inferior kind an insult? Milia argued that even setting aside the girl traveling with him, an important mission could not be entrusted to a lowly person like Jean. Jean stood silently observing and privately evaluated. Truly a young lady full of prejudice. August could only break into a cold sweat and spoke up to apologize. I sincerely apologize. Please don't mind her words. Karina, standing nearby, also spoke up to chime in. She stated that although Milia is a talented person, she possesses an extremely deep antipathy toward people of the inferior race. Hearing that, Jean glanced at the female knight and dropped a sarcastic remark. You and that young lady are truly cut from the same cloth. The remark left Karina completely speechless, while Milia folded her fan and proudly questioned her brother. Do you understand, brother? This isn't merely an infiltration mission. She emphasized that Jean would also have to shoulder the full responsibilities of a real instructor at the academy. Milia looked at Jean with a highly skeptical gaze. I don't believe an inferior person possesses enough capability to go teach others. Or does he actually possess the necessary qualifications already? Milia pressed for information regarding his educational background. Hakama accidentally blurted out a harsh truth. Lord Jean doesn't even know how to read. Jean could only embarrassedly remind the girl. Don't say that out loud. Milia immediately showed an attitude of contempt. See? Then he is completely unqualified to even talk about it. But Hakama still firmly defended him until the end. However, there are many things that only Lord Jean can teach. Lord Jean is truly someone more extraordinary than any of us. Milia thoughtfully observed Jean and silently evaluated. Well, it seems he possesses enough strength to suppress and maintain discipline among the students. But to be an educator requires much more than just that brute strength. Turning toward August, he was having a headache, apologetically reflecting on the incident of the students provoking a fight on the street. I already guessed that that young lady was the one behind them. I am very sorry and will definitely lecture her strictly. Jean only calmly replied, it's a small matter, I don't care to mind it. Next, Jean went straight into the professional matter. Furthermore, as an instructor, exactly what subject do you plan for me to teach? August proudly answered, it's spirit arts. Based on my assessment, you are someone extremely proficient in spirit arts. Am I right? Jean wondered which part he should teach, so August reassured him, just teaching the basics is enough. He brought up 4 basic techniques including ignition, discharge, freezing, and healing, then asserted, if you can perform even just 2 out of these 4 basic techniques, then you have already met the requirements. Jean asked back in surprise, is that all? Is it that simple? The remark made August panic. What do you mean by is that all? Don't tell me that you can use all of those special spirit arts that only a select few people can do. Jean suddenly realized a ridiculous truth. Bandits are considered the elites of this era? Truly hilarious. He smirked complacently. This is quite interesting. Jean decisively accepted the offer. All right. A vibrant blue nanoenergy glow enveloped his body. Jean flashed a proud smile and declared, let me teach this world what magic really is. A week passed by. At Haenix Academy, the atmosphere of the examination day. Enrollment was taking place in a highly bustling manner. Amidst the crowd of candidates frantically completing admission procedures, Hakama was also concentrating with high intensity, sitting neatly at the examination table to put all her mind into completing her written test. Meanwhile, in the magnificent corridor of the academy, a plump, beastman official was leading the way for August and Jean. He respectfully expressed, oh my, what an honor for us to have you personally escorting him here. among the rows of holy knights. I guess Unit 7 must surely be very busy, though. August calmly replied. Please don't concern yourself too much with that matter. Simply put, it has come to our turn to execute the duty. Noticing Jin's puzzled look, August softly explained that every year, the Holy Knights would take turns selecting a member to assume the position of a special instructor for the academy. And this year, that responsibility had been entrusted to Unit 7. Jin silently understood the matter and nodded slightly. I see. Walking on the long red carpet laid out across the endless corridor, Jin couldn't help but ponder. Will I really be suitable for doing this? The official led them to stop before a massive wooden door and invited them. Please come this way. The principal along with the board of directors are waiting for you inside. The door opened, revealing a solemn office with powerful figures waiting behind the desks. Sitting in the chairperson's seat was an elderly woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She spoke up in greeting. It has been a very long time since we last met. August immediately bowed respectfully. Greetings, Principal. The principal smiled, recalling past memories. She praised August for, since graduating as the most outstanding student, rapidly becoming an extremely prominent knight in just a short period of time. She expressed her gratitude because he had agreed to assist the academy during this period. August proudly asserted, that is the responsibility I must fulfill, ma'am. The principal pondered, admitting she had heard some rumors about August, not only resolving issues regarding spirit arts, but also being drawn into internal disputes between factions. She understood that his corps was currently very busy and could not deploy too much manpower at this time. However, she emphasized with a sharp, cold gaze that does not mean the knight's side has the right to disrespect this prestigious academy. Faced with Jin's presence, a highly skeptical voice rang out. Don't tell me you guys plan to have this guy serve as an instructor here. This lady has already caught wind of it. August immediately spoke up to reassure and asserted that Jin's capabilities far exceeded all members of his Unit 7. He guaranteed that when it comes to fighting, Old Man Jin is number one. The principal temporarily accepted August's assertion, but she was still pondering how to resolve this conflict. Immediately, Gita, a member of the board, slammed the table and stood up abruptly in fierce opposition. He roared that at this sacred and historical school, there had never been a precedent allowing an inferior race to stand in class and teach. Gita pointed his hand straight at Jin and yelled out that this position was not meant for the lowly class, and this appointment is no different from insulting the entire academy. After listening to the opinion of Gita, the principal turned to ask for Lord Richmond's perspective. This fat guy also quickly agreed. He argued that the majority of the academy's students come from noble lineages. Using an inferior person to teach will definitely throw the school into chaos. The principal looked at August and concluded that her thoughts were basically the same as theirs. August spoke up to suggest letting Jin present himself. Jin stepped forward a pace and politely bowed. Pardon me for introducing myself a bit late. I come from Kodama village. My name is Jin Shido. Witnessing that demeanor, the principal silently evaluated that despite being terribly insulted, he still maintained a strangely calm composure. Jin looked straight at the board and proudly stated, I completely understand your concerns, gentlemen. However, I would like to ask a small question. He bluntly questioned, am I unworthy of being an instructor, merely because I am someone of the inferior race? Or is it because I do not possess enough capability and true strength? Faced with the silence of the members, the principal decisively asserted, obviously, it is the second option, because as long as one possesses true strength, other things do not matter. She asked if Jin could prove his capability. Seeing that, August smiled slightly and suggested, if that's the case, why don't we try running a little test? The testing location was quickly moved to the Spirit Arts training ground of Haenix Academy. Because today coincided with the entrance exam, there was practically no sign of any students in this area. Gita smiled sinisterly and mocked Jin. Losing will be less humiliating since there's no audience. Jin still maintained a cold expression, silently preparing for the upcoming match. Standing in the middle of the vast arena, the principal announced that the rules were very simple. The two would duel each other using only spirit arts. She asserted that witnessing Jin's strength with her own eyes was the best way to evaluate him for this instructor position. This unusual event quickly attracted the attention of nearby students. They whispered and gossiped about an exhibition match that was about to take place. Observing from a distance, Milia thought to herself that this was probably the first time she would see Master Gita actually step up to fight. Jin sighed faintly with a look of utter boredom. What a complete waste of time. The ancient ancestor is getting sleepy over there. On the opposite side, Richmond and Gita looked at him with eyes full of utter disdain, challenging to see what someone from an inferior race could actually do. Auguste stood silently observing with a solemn expression, as this was also the first time he would witness Jean fighting with his own eyes. In their prejudice, those belonging to the low class race usually possess very weak physiques, and even if they happen to possess divine power, they can only unleash a very small fraction of it. He secretly hoped that his decision was not a mistake. I hope that my decision is not a mistake. Gita narrowed his eyes and asked, "Are you ready?" The moment Jean replied, the old man flashed a sinister smile and declared that he would be the one to strike first. Without a single moment of hesitation, Gita unleashed a massive, blazing fireball, forcing Jean to quickly dodge to the side to avoid the attack that was violently exploding right behind him. The intensity of the match left the nearby students gasping in awe. Gita was complacent, seeing that there were several students observing his performance. He roared and then continuously unleashed bright yellow bolts of electricity. Blindingly, Jean continuously shifted with agility to dodge the lightning bolts, striking down onto the ground, causing thick smoke and dust to billow across the training ground. Seeing the opponent continuously dodging the attacks, Gita spoke up with a look of complete contempt. "You're good at running, aren't you? Truly an inferior being." The old man began to boast that he was the valedictorian graduate of this academy. "Even though I couldn't become a holy knight," Gita channeled all his energy to create a massive, threatening halo of fire and roared, asserting that Jean stood absolutely no chance of being his opponent. Jean sighed faintly. He thought to himself that honestly, he shouldn't use this kind of power to deal with a human. But right now he had no other choice. Jean focused force into his legs and then suddenly unleashed a vibrant blue surge of energy enveloping his entire body. He looked straight at the opponent and declared with great authority, "I will show you guys a small fraction of it then." A massive energy sphere formed in the palm of Jin's hand, and Gita looked up into midair, completely bewildered and full of doubt. Immediately, a suffocating pressure cast down upon the entire arena. Gita was crushed down onto the ground by the invisible power, causing the stone floor to crack open, rendering him completely unable to move. Witnessing that horrific scene, both the principal and Richmond panicked, unable to believe their eyes. Even Auguste was stunned and broke into a cold sweat before Jin's overwhelming authority. Milia, observing from a distance, uttered in complete shock and horror, What on earth is this?" Gita lay miserably on the floor, groaning in despair. What just happened?" Jean walked over with an imposing air and nonchalantly explained, "Just adjusting the gravity a bit. Why the tension?" He glanced at the people present and sarcastically asked if that type of spirit art was something they had never known about before. Jean flashed a sharp and cold smile. He clearly asserted that he will have plenty of things to teach at this academy, not only for the students, but also as a lesson for all of you as well. Gita was completely suppressed under the force of gravity. He knelt prostrate on the arena floor, his breath rapid in utter shock. Jean still casually readjusted his gloves, then lightly snapped his fingers to release the energy. The moment the pressure disappeared, Gita frantically bellowed, "You? What kind of trick did you just pull?" "The valedictorian looks like a flustered chicken." Jean only calmly replied, "That was clearly a spirit art. Don't you know about it?" Gita furiously shrieked, as he could not accept this reality. "I have never heard of any kind of spirit art. That is so strange. You must have definitely used some cheap fraudulent tricks." Witnessing the overwhelming performance, the onlookers began to whisper and gossip. The principal thoughtfully looked toward the arena and evaluated. "It seems everything has concluded." While Auguste also nodded slightly in agreement, the students, standing from afar, could not hide their astonishment at what had just unfolded. One student uttered in complete admiration, "There's no doubt about it. Those are spirit arts at a very high level." Standing amidst the crowd, Milia looked at Jean with a highly skeptical gaze mixed with fear. She could not believe her eyes. How could this be possible? Unlike us, who evolved thanks to the protection of the spirits, that inferior race inherently cannot possess a single bit of divine power, though. Milia trembled and wondered, who on earth is this mysterious man? Meanwhile, Gita lost all his sanity and rushed over to tightly grab Jin's collar. Facing that aggressiveness, Jean calmly requested, "Calm down a little bit, kid." A week after that, life at Haenix Academy continued to unfold in a highly rigorous manner. This place is not merely a provider of textbook knowledge, but its core objective is to train real warriors, those who possess sufficient capability to eliminate the raw dragons. The regulations here are extremely brutal. Any student who cannot keep up with the educational progress will be expelled from the academy without mercy. The principal stood on the podium, her voice echoing throughout the great hall. However, for those who complete the program, joining the ranks of the Holy Knights will no longer be a far-fetched dream. Whoever survives this course is truly capable. She emphasized that every final result depends entirely on the capability of the students themselves. From the high balcony, the upperclassmen observed the ceremony and commented that this year, the number of new students who are commoners makes up quite a large portion. Milia stood there quietly, holding her paper fan with a highly thoughtful expression until there was a call from behind. A red-haired male student named Lias approached with a confident smile. He appeared surprised to see Milia show up at this entrance ceremony. Lias sarcastically noted that he had thought she was the type of person who never cared about others. But Milia immediately shot back with a sharp, cold reply. She argued that Lias showed up here only because he wanted to find a way to please some prestigious noble among the freshmen just to save face. Suddenly, Lias's gaze froze as he looked down at the rows of seats below. He frantically asked, "What on earth is going on over there? Why is someone from the inferior race sitting prominently in the seats reserved for instructors?" The answer rang out very concisely. "Simply because he is a professor." Lias gasped in shock and bellowed, "What did you say?" He turned around to ask Milia about her perspective regarding that man. It still could not hide his contempt. No matter what, though, he is still just someone from a low-class race. This kind of attitude will definitely get slapped by the ancient ancestor. Milia half closed her fan, her deep blue eyes clearly showing her displeasure. But she still softly replied, "Perhaps you are not wrong." From the instructor seats below, Jean slightly glanced up at the balcony. He clearly sensed the scrutinizing gazes pouring down toward him. Jean thoughtfully observed the massive scale of the academy and told himself that conducting an investigation at a place this vast will definitely consume a lot of time. However, the discriminatory looks from the students around made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Jean realized he had to clear his inferior label right away. He understood that if this situation continues, he will attract far more attention than necessary and become the most suspicious person in the academy. Jean made up his mind that, first of all, he needed to win the recognition of every single one of them. The academy bells chimed, signaling the start of classes. Inside the lecture hall, Gita stood on the podium and proudly declared, "Now, we will begin our lecture on spirit arts. From this day forward, to make absolutely sure that you aren't outperformed by the new recruits, all of you must always stay vigilant." He looked down at the few scattered students, smiling with hidden meaning. Perhaps this might not bother you at all since you inherently belong to the elite class, but yes, that is what I wanted to convey. Gita looked around the completely empty room and pretended to be surprised. What on earth is going on here? Why is it that today the class attendance is so sparse, huh? Could it be that all of you are lacking enthusiasm? Lias sat below, slightly closing his eyes in sheer exasperation. That's only obvious. In reality, Gita was immensely proud of his malicious plot. Humph. Who would ever care to listen to a lecture taught by someone of the inferior kind? I intentionally spread the rumor everywhere that a person belonging to a low-class race would be teaching today. This trick is as old as time. Gita, Jean, stood quietly in the back, silently feeling the annoyance surrounding him. Gita turned around, flashing a fake smile, and urged, "All right, let's begin then. Lord Jean, please introduce yourself." Stepping onto the podium with a calm demeanor, Jean spoke up. "Let me begin the introduction. My name is Jean. I have been deployed here to guide you through the fundamental knowledge of spirit arts in the coming period. It's a pleasure to meet you all." Instantly, Lias, a student with blazing red hair and a fierce appearance, abruptly stood up defiantly. "Do you honestly think you are qualified enough to do this?" Just as he starts barking, he runs right into a master. Jean was not flustered at all. He calmly looked straight at the opponent and shot back. "As for that, let you yourselves pass judgment. If you feel that what I teach is worthless, then you are completely free to skip my class." The highly courageous response made Lias freeze for a moment in amusement. "Humph." Jean lowered his voice, his gaze becoming firmer and more solemn than ever before. "But there is one mandatory rule that you must remember. Absolutely never use this power to harm people. Never use this power to harm others." Right after he finished speaking, Jean extended his hand. A vibrant blue nano-energy glow erupted powerfully in the palm of his hand, radiating a terrifying pressure that enveloped the entire lecture hall. Jean began the lecture by explaining the true nature of spirit arts. That is precisely the capability to nullify the super-regeneration capability of the corrupted. However, this suppressing effect has absolutely no function on the human body, but merely inflicts ordinary physical injuries upon them. He looked straight at the students and posed a question. Do you know the reason why? Because this source of power was created with the sole purpose of destroying the corrupted. With a sharp gaze, Jean put forward a strict requirement. Therefore, I require that you are not allowed to abuse this authority. Milia stood by the side, quietly observing with a highly anxious expression. Immediately, a male student with beast ears smirked with complete contempt. Huh, are you an idiot? Power is simply power, that's all. Barking early. Have you eaten anything yet, kid? He complacently rested his hands behind his head, sarcastically noting that he had been curious to see what an inferior person could teach, yet Jean told them not to use spirit arts. He laughed mockingly in a highly provocative manner. Perhaps you are just trembling with fear before us simply because you are an incompetent person of that inferior race, aren't you? Those insulting words made the entire lecture hall burst into highly sarcastic laughter from the students. But Jean still maintained a calm expression. He smirked slightly and put forward a challenge. If you think that I don't possess true strength, then try to prove it. Before the astonishment of the opponent, he requested that the student use his most powerful move to attack him. Jean proudly declared, if you can scratch me even just a little bit, I promise I will vanish from this place and never return. The highly courageous assertion made the gray-haired student flash a triumphant smile. Ready to strike to get rid of the person he looked down upon, he channeled all his divine power, creating a threatening, blazing yellow electricity current, and roared. Don't cry and beg for mercy when you regret it, you inferior being. He reminded Jean. Don't wait until it's too late to back out. The attack was so powerful that Gita, standing behind, also frantically yelled out. You idiot, stop right now. Are you trying to hit me as well? Master and student are about to get blasted away together. Ignoring the warning, the student roared, take this, then launched the massive bolt of lightning straight at Jean, creating an earth-shattering explosion that enveloped him. The Beastman student smiled complacently after the attack, but that smile quickly vanished as a surge of energy tore through the smoke. An energy arrow grazed past his face, embedding itself straight into the wall behind, creating terrifying cracks. Amidst the smoke and dust, amidst the dust and smoke of Jean, stepped out imposing and completely unscathed. He coldly warned, if I wanted to kill you, I would have done it ages ago. Jean stood firmly on the podium, glowing hexagonal nanoshields surrounding his hand like a testament to absolute power. He stated in a low voice, judging others based solely on appearance is a fatal mistake. Witnessing that scene, Lias couldn't help but be shocked, cold sweat dripping down as he wondered what on earth that power just now was, and whether it was truly a spirit art or not. Jean looked straight at the stunned students and continued, you believe that I was weak simply because I come from the inferior race, didn't you? But the reality is that I am much stronger than you. He smirked slightly, asking the miserable student what he should call him now, and then decisively declared that he would provide the answer to all of them himself. Jean stood proudly, his sharp, cold gaze sweeping over the entire lecture hall with a highly arrogant smile. He proudly announced his new title, and that is Professor. The new title sounds so captivating, everyone. Jean stood firmly on the podium, casting his eyes to scan the classroom, and then posed a highly technical question. Does anyone here truly and clearly understand the necessary conditions to activate spirit arts? The student who had just attacked him earlier stammered. In response, as for that, it simply relies on one's own imagination. Isn't that right? He further explained that mages will focus on raising their divine power, then transmit the image in their mind to the spirits to materialize them, and assumed that was the most basic knowledge. Jean slightly smiled. He acknowledged that imagination plays an important role but decisively asserted, however, that is absolutely not the prerequisite condition for activation. He explained that the spirits, in reality, only unleash power after receiving a specific wavelength frequency. Faced with the student's bewilderment over the concept of wavelength frequency, Jean calmly stated that there are a total of 8 main types of wavelengths. One by one, he demonstrated powers ranging from pyrokinesis, electricity discharge, healing, all the way to freezing, and emphasized, these are things that you students should have mastered a long time ago. Aside from the types just mentioned, Jean continued to introduce more advanced capabilities such as gravity manipulation, light manipulation, or controlling air pressure. He raised his hand, creating a glowing polyhedron, and revealed. And the type of capability I deployed earlier was precisely spatial protection. Witnessing that scene, Master Gita panicked, his eyes wide with astonishment. 8 types? Are you a monster? Jean calmly replied that to apply these foundational principles, visualization is an indispensable element, similar to the way that student had launched an electric spear at him earlier. Jean flashed a highly confident smile. He adjusted his posture and proudly declared, "Now then, shall we begin the official lecture? This classroom is about to explode." Jean paced along the magnificent corridors of the academy. His mind was still constantly pondering over the secret investigation mission. Amidst this vast space, wherever he went, he only saw students walking back and forth busily, making the search for suspicious traces become extremely difficult. Jean thought to himself, I need to conduct the investigation inside this colossal academy. But wherever I go, I see students walking back and forth busily. I still haven't found any location that is truly suspicious. He wondered if he should target the restricted areas, where ordinary students are not allowed to approach. His appearance attracted quite a lot of attention. Whispers of, "That's the professor," rang out from the students, while Milia quietly followed behind with a highly scrutinizing gaze. Milia suddenly called out to stop him. "Hey, over there. Who on earth are you anyway?" She stood with her arms crossed, looking straight at Jean, and bluntly admitted, "It turns out you are not merely someone of the low-class race, are you? You are definitely not an ordinary person. I must admit that much." Milia could not hide her skepticism, as someone considered inferior should not have been able to use all types of spirit arts, something that inherently was considered impossible for his social class. Jean still maintained his usual calm composure. He softly replied, "I have just finished explaining this in class, though. As long as one has the capability to separate the wavelengths, anyone can do it." Hearing that, Milia snapped irritably, "Don't talk about it so easily like that. If it were that easy to execute, you wouldn't have attracted such massive attention like this." Noticing the curiosity of the surrounding crowd, who were whispering about whether all types spirit arts were within his grasp, she decisively suggested, "Let's find somewhere else to talk." The two paced together, leaving the crowded area to find a more private space. Stopping at a quiet corner of the corridor, Milia narrowed her eyes and asked, "Well, are you willing to answer my question now?" Jean did not avoid it at all, casually revealing the truth. "It's simple. Throughout the past 100 million years, I am a person from ancient times who lay in a deep sleep at Kodama village." The ancient ancestor is speaking the truth, but nobody believes him. Milia could only freeze, then dropped a sarcastic remark. "You are indeed a very good joker," she demanded. He be more serious and pressed for an answer once again. "Then let me ask you again. What did you do at that time 100 million years ago?" Jin's gaze suddenly became sharp, cold, and deep. He replied in a low voice, "Back then, I was a secret agent." "It's a long story," Milia asked in bewilderment. "What do you mean by a secret agent?" Jean casually explained, "It is a person who works in service to the nation." He thoughtfully recalled the past, when he himself used to fight against countless villains. Even though those things took place 100 million years ago, every memory still returned vividly, as if it were just yesterday. The image of Jean, in modern combat gear, holding a gun and taking cover behind ruined walls, amidst stray bullets, appeared vividly. Fierce battles amidst smoke, fire, bombs, and bullets made Jean couldn't help but utter, "How truly nostalgic." Milia curiously asked, "Why would someone like you end up sinking into such a long, endless sleep?" Jean bitterly admitted, "Because I failed." He used to be conceited, thinking that as long as he made an effort, he could manage everything. But the price to pay was complete helplessness upon losing everything amidst the ruins and the rampage of hideous, mutated monsters. Jean 3092 looked at Milia, and said, "I also accepted this instructor position with the hope that all of you boys and girls will help me out when encountering difficulties." Milia remained silent, unable to help but doubt the authenticity of the stories he told. Suddenly, Jean spoke up to ask about their direction. Milia only replied that she wanted to fully execute the duty of a guide. She led him to stop before an old room and announced, "We've arrived." Looking at the dusty room, Jean questioned, "Where is this?" Milia explained that this is where the instructors store materials serving the classes. Jean disappointedly wondered, A dilapidated storage space like this is called a library? He cast his eyes to observe the old bookshelves and the bizarre antique items, then suddenly turned around to ask Milia the true reason she led him here. Milia, holding stacks of materials in her hands, said, I'm also investigating, you know. Milia showed Jean a map and noted, there is a highly unusual space located right next to this room. It is vast enough to potentially form another room. She skeptically asked if this was suspicious. Jean nodded in agreement. Very suspicious, isn't it? If there is any hidden secret, it is definitely located right here. He approached the bookshelf, decisively pulling an item that activated a secret mechanism. A pitch-black passageway leading downwards suddenly appeared behind the bookshelf. Jean softly uttered, I see. It seems your deduction was absolutely correct. Milia asked in complete shock. How on earth could you notice that? Jean explained that although this area was covered by a thick layer of dust, this specific spot alone was strangely clean. He admitted that the rest relied on intuition accumulated from his own experience. Jean instructed, I will go inside to check. You should stand out here and wait. However, Milia immediately objected. Wait a minute, I want to go with you too. Jean warned in a serious tone. This will be very dangerous. You know, if there is something inside, there is a possibility that it's the corrupted. Milia firmly replied, please do not look down on me. Milia confidently asserted, no matter what, my scores are among the top of this academic year. My skills are also superior to my brothers, you know. Faced with that determination, Jean had to yield. All right then. I will trust in your capability. He flashed a cryptic smile and began walking down. Jean used the light manipulation technique, creating a glowing sphere to lead the way through the dark and damp stone steps. Jean remarked that this path led down to a rather deep place. Underground. He silently expressed his admiration. The light manipulation technique is indeed very convenient. Looking into the deep darkness ahead, Jean joked slightly. If this were a fantasy story, I'd have a feeling that monsters are about to appear. Milia asked back in bewilderment. Fantasy? She quickly returned to the main topic. By the way, let's go back to the previous topic for a moment. If you've been fighting villains for such a long time, do you have any clues about the suspect yet? Jean only smiled and replied, you are asking too many questions for a single workday. Is the ancient ancestor dodging an interview? Jean thoughtfully put his hand to his chin and deduced, well, I guess it's highly possible that Lord Richmond is also involved in this matter. Milia asked back in surprise, why do you know that? Jean explained that although Richmond appeared very calm when talking, during the moments when he wasn't talking to anyone, his mind didn't seem to be there. According to his experience, that is a common trait found in those who are forced to do something against their original purpose. He noticed that Richmond's alertness was unusually intense, but Jean still chose to pretend as if he knew nothing to continue the investigation. Hearing that, Milia wondered, before this, I thought Master Gita was the suspicious one, but that would be impossible for an instructor like him. Milia is too naive. Gita is a master of deep acting. She believed that all of Gita's emotions were displayed too clearly on his face, proving he must surely be someone with a kind soul and no schemes at all. Jean only smiled at that naivety and then urged, all right, let's keep moving. The deeper they went down, the more Milia couldn't help but be amazed by the scale of this place. It's hard to believe there is such a vast space beneath the Academy's basement. Suddenly, Jean froze. His eyes locked onto the area ahead with a look of utter shock. Seeing this, Milia anxiously asked, what's wrong? Jean broke into a cold sweat, whispering in absolute shock. To think it would be in a place like this. Appearing before their eyes amidst the dark space was a colossal, solid metal gate, with firmly locked wheels full of majesty. Jean was completely stunned to realize that this was precisely the gate leading to the secret laboratory that Kagura had painstakingly left behind all over this world. Jean stood frozen before the colossal gate, silently confirming that this was indeed the laboratory Kagura had left behind. He noticed this door was strictly protected by advanced nanoparticles. Witnessing its grand scale, Milia uttered in complete shock. A colossal gate like this is located beneath the Academy? What kind of secret is this Academy hiding? Oh my god. She anxiously asked if the two of them could step inside. Jean explained that, fundamentally, they are required to have an access key to be able to enter. Hearing that, Milia wondered, an access key? Jean explained, think of it as a conductor to open this door. He thoughtfully recalled that back at Kodama village, Hakama was precisely the one who had inherited the key. Jean deduced, it is highly possible that in this place, someone also received a similar Inheritance. If that was true, he extended his hand and activated. The glowing nano-energy surged in his palm. Jean placed his hand onto the metal surface. Immediately, the system issued an announcement, confirming access authorization at the highest level. Jean was proceeding to unlock the door. The colossal gate began to move, slowly opening up to Milia's absolute astonishment. Jean thought to himself, the one who intends to sow chaos upon this nation is precisely the one holding the access key to this place. Revealed behind the door was a hideous, colossal creature with countless glowing eyes, imprisoned behind iron bars, something Jean referred to as an ultimate weapon. Milia trembled in absolute fear. This horrific thing is right beneath the academy floor. This tour is getting a bit intense. She suddenly recalled and asked how Jean could open the door without a key. Jean walked over imposing and only replied briefly. People of ancient times are highly special. Milia looked at Jin's back, her mind unable to help but doubt his ancient identity. She wondered if this man had truly come from 100 million years ago. Meanwhile, Jean approached the iron cages, his eyes clearly showing a look of thoughtfulness as he observed the creatures inside. He thought to himself, how truly strange. Why would they let themselves be captured so submissively like this? Jean noticed that even the other corrupted creatures also showed similar behavior. They were completely still and showed no signs of wanting to attack. This reminded him of the monster that the bandits had once possessed. While in the cage, it also kept perfectly quiet, just like this. But what made Jean ponder the most was the appearance of a corrupted creature, with a colossal size being imprisoned behind the iron bars. He wondered how they managed to stuff this monster down here. Milia half closed her fan. She asserted that her brother's suspicions regarding the shady dealings inside this academy were absolutely correct. She proposed a plan to organize an ambush right here to force the mastermind to show their face. However, Jean immediately objected. No. Before doing that, we need to lock down the academy and destroy all of these corrupted creatures. Hearing that, Milia asked in astonishment, do you want to just let that criminal have a chance to escape? Then, Jean explained in a low voice, I understand your feeling. But what if these corrupted monsters suddenly lose control? Jean emphasized that if an incident occurred, the ones in danger first would be the students right above their heads at this very moment. He believed that Auguste would definitely also prioritize safety of everyone over prioritizing the capture of the villain. Milia stood frozen in thought, then also had to admit that what Jean said made sense. Jin's gaze suddenly became sharp and cold. He thought to himself, and besides, I am having a bad premonition. My instinct, at times like this, is usually highly accurate. The ancient ancestor's instinct is always spot on. Jean decided to stay behind to examine this laboratory a bit more carefully. Jean entrusted the important responsibility to Milia, contact Auguste, and close down the academy for me immediately. Having received her agreement, he decisively turned his back and walked away. All right, Jean paced along the quiet corridor, his mind constantly pondering over the hidden secrets regarding the current situation like this. He silently hoped that he would soon find some clue to untangle the knot of the matter. Meanwhile, whispers and gossip began to spread throughout every corner of the academy. People rumored the new professor gave him a sound beating, you know. Oh, how truly pathetic. Hearing the students' mocking words aimed at him, Gita trembled with rage, his face distorted with resentment. He gnashed his teeth and growled. Just because of that inferior species, my honor has been completely ruined. Gita could not accept the truth and kept asserting he could control 8 types of spirit magic. He must definitely be using some kind of fraudulent trick. The old man frantically stamped his feet and shrieked in the middle of the corridor. I swear I will unmask him with my own hands. Right at that moment, the principal suddenly appeared from behind and spoke up to remind him, Lord Gita, the students are starting to feel frightened, you know. Therefore, could you stop doing those bizarre actions? Caught red-handed in a pathetic posture, Gita frantically uttered, P. Principal. The principal smiled slightly with hidden meaning. Oh dear. I don't mean to judge your personal hobbies. But, making. Gita could only feel aggrieved upon realizing she only regarded his actions as a joke. The principal suddenly inquired, by the way, have you seen Lord Richmond anywhere? Gita thought for a brief moment and replied, I haven't seen him since today's entrance ceremony took place. The answer made the principal clearly show a look of exhaustion. She put her hand to her forehead, sighing, this is truly too troublesome. I have something I want to consult him about regarding the classes for the new students. Suddenly, she froze. her eyes opening wide with astonishment, as she spotted something unusual ahead. What is that? Outside. The principal stared in stunned disbelief at the sky, where a gloomy purple cloud was tightly surrounding the towers of the academy. She couldn't help but shudder, wondering, what on earth is that thing? Principal, our school is about to get blasted away. At the exact same time, Milia was running with all her might along the dark corridors, her breath rapid and full of panic. Just as she stepped through the wooden door, Milia clutched her chest, panting heavily. There was only a single thought left in her mind. I need to quickly inform my brother about this news. However, a deep, muffled voice suddenly rang out from the darkness. Planning to tattle, Lady Walton? Milia turned pale, her eyes widening in horror, as she recognized the person blocking her path was none other than Lord Richmond. The fat guy flashed a highly sinister smile, leaving Milia only able to utter in panic, Lord Richmond? Meanwhile, deep underground, Jean pushed open the heavy metal door to step into a room flooded with a blazing red light. He uttered in shock, what the heck is this? Before his eyes was a colossal machine enveloping a blazing red sphere that radiated powerful surges of energy. That sphere was pulsating continuously, with a thumping rhythm, just like the heart of a living creature. Jean thoughtfully wondered, could Kagura have created this thing? Without taking too much time, Jean quickly approached the control panel and began operating the system. Immediately, a secret storage compartment popped open, revealing a transmission cube inside, along with a nanoparticle syringe. He recognized this was precisely a transmission system, and a nanoparticle injector that Kagura had left behind. Jean held the cube in his hand, silently hoping Kagura had left some kind of clue to help him explain all the bizarre things that were currently taking place. Immediately, the device was activated, and Kagura's image appeared. Can you hear me, Jean? It seems you have finally found your way here. He asserted that he had predicted Jean would manage to do it, because this place is precisely the location closest to the laboratory where he woke up. Kagura continued to reveal that inside this very laboratory, we once manufactured an incredibly astonishing device. A portion of its functionality is currently sealed tightly inside the nanoparticles. With a highly complacent expression, Kagura proudly claimed, I am truly a genius. Then posed a highly mysterious question. Guess what device this is? The answer left Jean completely stunned. That is precisely a tool used for teleportation. Jean repeated in shock and disbelief. Teleportation? Are you kidding me? Looking toward the colossal monster that was being imprisoned in the blazing red sphere, radiating powerful energy before his eyes. He could only utter, unbelievable. The blazing red sphere still continued to pulsate continuously, like a colossal heart. In the middle of the deep, dark room, underground, the colossal monster with countless glowing eyes was still being imprisoned in the dead silence of the darkness. The ticking of the hand of the astronomical clock rang out steadily, beat by beat, marking the passage of highly tense moments. Jean stood frozen before a grand machine, at the center of which was a blazing red sphere pulsating continuously, like a mechanical heart. Jean uttered in shock within his thoughts. A machine used to teleport through space? He couldn't help but be astonished. Before a technology capable of connecting two separate spatial points together, a peak technique that even the civilization from 100 million years ago still could not execute. Looking at the illustrated image of matter being moved through spatial gates, Jean began to piece all the events together logically. If that is indeed the truth, then the things that Auguste mentioned before about the corrupted unexpectedly appearing at the capital now have a clear answer. He skeptically wondered, could they have been transported there using this teleportation device? Jin's gaze became sharp and cold as he realized even the mutated monsters in that great hall over there and this very thing were closely linked, being that exact spatial teleportation device. But when looking into the vibrant blue energy flow of the prototype teleportation gate, Jean suddenly froze in complete astonishment. It looks way too different. There is definitely something wrong with this gate, guys. He turned back to look at the blazing red sphere pulsating violently behind him and pondered, what on earth is this thing anyway? Right at that moment, a dry clicking sound rang out from the astronomical clock, signaling that an important mechanism had just been officially activated. The blazing red sphere suddenly unleashed a blinding flash of light, radiating powerful impulses that made the entire room shake violently. Jean frantically raised his hand to shield his eyes from the terrifying pressure. At the exact same time, inside the iron cages, the body of the colossal monster began to glow and disintegrate into tiny molecular particles. The hideous entities were gradually being teleported away under the impact of the maximum spatial energy. The blazing red light enveloped the colossal monster, making it vanish in the blink of an eye to Jin's astonishment. Right at that moment, outside the academy, the female knight, Ria, rushed over in a panic and called out urgently, "Hey, Auguste! An emergency situation has occurred." At the capital, Auguste stood frozen with a highly solemn expression. He replied in a low voice, "I am already fully aware of the situation." Auguste slightly gnashed his teeth, his eyes clearly showing a look of anxiety, as he realized the severity of the matter. We are totally doomed like this. In the distance, the sky over the capital sank into the blazing red color of the teleportation light pillars. A barrage of corrupted monsters fell from above, destroying every single corner of the city. Auguste bitterly uttered, "This is the worst-case scenario." At the exact same time, in a quiet corridor of the academy, while Milia was standing there dazed, Lord Richmond suddenly appeared from the darkness with a highly mysterious smile. The old man spoke up and asked in a sarcastic tone, "What is going on? Why has your expression become so serious, huh?" Milia turned back in stunned disbelief. Richmond narrowed his eyes at her and softly spoke, "My lady," not backing down at all. Milia unleashed a burst of blue divine power and proudly ordered, "Get out of my way immediately." She pointed her hand straight at the fat guy's face and firmly questioned, "You are also involved in this matter, aren't you?" Richmond suddenly burst into delighted laughter. The old man casually admitted, "Oh, so it turns out you have already realized that long ago, huh? It seems you have been quietly investigating this whole time, haven't you?" Richmond's face suddenly turned cold. He growled, asserting, "However, you are a step too late." Milia asked back in shock, "What do you mean by that, Richmond?" Standing proud and blocking the path, the old man proudly declared, "That is exactly what I wanted to say." He slowly explained, "In fact, the original plan was to be a bit later. However, because someone kept loitering around snooping and probing, I accelerated the progress." Richmond is extremely bitter about Jean by now. Richmond narrowed his eyes with murderous intent. He silently assessed that Jean would definitely become a massive threat to his plan, if not eliminated soon. Richmond asserted, "I can sense that through my own intuition. That guy is truly just as troublesome as your brother." Jean, at this moment, was running with all his might along the energy pipelines, trying to find a way to prevent the disaster. Richmond glanced toward the entrance of the secret basement and concluded, "In fact, right at this moment, he has already found that secret passage. Just finished boasting, and he's about to get beaten up." Richmond stared intently at Milia. He growled triumphantly that Jean was currently right beneath their feet. He declared his desire to uproot these worrisome seeds immediately to eliminate any future trouble. Facing the threat, Milia still maintained her determination and questioned whether the old man truly thought he was capable of defeating her. Richmond flashed a sinister smile, confidently asserting that he would manage to do it because currently he possessed an unstoppable source of power. However, just as he was engrossed in boasting, Hakama quietly appeared from behind, gathering his strength to lift a large ceramic vase right above the old man's head. Milia was completely stunned upon witnessing this unexpected appearance. Richmond, still completely unaware, continued to brag, "Wishing to show you the effectiveness of my new energy." Before he could even finish speaking, Hakama decisively swung the vase down hard on his head. An extremely powerful impact made the vase shatter into pieces, knocking the fat guy out right on the spot. Milia smirked slightly, smiling at this half-laughable, half-crying situation, while Hakama raised her hand to wipe away her sweat and breathed a sigh of relief because the matter had been taken care of. Hakama stood proudly beside the unconscious Richmond and proudly declared, "That's a wrap, I won." Still unable to overcome her shock, Milia pressed to know why the little girl appeared in the secret place. Hakama honestly explained that she was looking for Jean, because the situation outside was becoming extremely chaotic, and everyone was in dire need of support from him. The little girl pointed her hand toward her accompanying friend and noted that it was Kudo who saw Jean entering inside this area, which was why the two of them followed. Milia cast her eyes to observe the newly arrived little girl and asked if this was a first-year student. The little girl with rabbit ears politely confirmed her name was Kudo. It turned out Kudo anxiously whispered to ask Hakama whether that action just now was all right, since she had just struck an instructor. Hakama casually reassured her that he hadn't managed to see their faces yet, so the two of them could pin all the blame on Milia. The statement made Milia furiously yell out, demanding the little girl stop calling her by that title of my lady. Meanwhile, Jean was hurriedly running along the corridors, heading straight toward the center of the riot. Hakama ran over in a panic. She frantically called out loudly, "Lord Jean!" Right when Jean stepped out from the secret passage and saw Richmond lying motionless on the floor, Hakama anxiously asked, "What on earth just happened?" Without waiting for him to answer, the little girl tightly grabbed Jin's hand and urged with a completely panicked expression, "Jean, the situation outside is turning out very badly. An urgent emergency report, let's run." Jean quietly replied, "I know already." His gaze became sharp and cold as he realized a horrifying truth. The corrupted crowd in the laboratory have all broken loose. Milia was completely stunned upon realizing the severity of the matter. That would mean the whole group immediately ran with all their might through the magnificent corridors of the academy to head outside. Right as they stood from above looking down, a horrifying scene appeared before their eyes. The entire capital was sinking into a sea of fire. Consecutive explosions tore through the peaceful air. The corrupted were frantically attacking innocent citizens. Tragic screams echoed across the streets. Wolf monsters bared their fangs to pounce on pedestrians. While in the sky, colossal monstrous birds were also swooping down to carry away innocent people. The destruction did not stop there. The colossal footsteps of the mutated monsters crushed every architectural structure beneath their feet. A massive entity with glowing muscles was imposingly advancing into the city center, sowing terror into anyone who saw it. The monster with countless glowing eyes from the laboratory had now escaped outside. It roared frantically and radiated a blazing red murderous aura as if it wanted to swallow the entire kingdom of Cosmosia. Witnessing the scene of devastation, Milia trembled, the little girl's hands shaking violently out of fear. Is the capital in danger? Jean gnashed his teeth in deep regret. He blamed himself for his own subjectivity. I have made a mistake in judgment. I should have destroyed that machine right from the start. Suddenly, Hakama pointed her hand forward and called out loudly, "Jean, look up over there." Her sharp eye spotted it right on time. At the center of the capital, a colossal pillar of light suddenly exploded, revealing the silhouette of an ultimate entity reigning amidst the burning ruins. The colossal monster roared frantically. The energy accumulating in its mouth was aiming straight toward the royal castle. Milia and Hakama couldn't help but be completely horrified upon realizing that if this situation continued, the members of the royal family would definitely be in danger. Facing the tragic situation caused by his own subjectivity, Jean decisively took out the nanosubstance syringe and thought to himself, "My mistake. Let me handle it myself." Right as the nanosubstance merged into his blood, a powerful blue electricity current exploded, enveloping Jin's body. This was precisely the result of the power upgrade that helped streamline the spatial teleportation process, thanks to the energy source stored in the nanoparticles. Although it is limited to usage of once per day and only within the range observable by the naked eye, it brings about absolute mobility. At the exact same time, the monster officially opened fire, launching a colossal pillar of destructive light aimed straight at the castle. Amidst the astonishment of Milia and Hakama, Jean vanished in a flash of blue light and immediately appeared right in midair. He blocked the path of the light pillar, gathering all his strength to activate the defense system to create hexagonal nanoshields, stopping the earth-shattering attack right in the middle of thin air. While the capital was sinking into chaos, a dark blue corrupted monster with sharp teeth was frantically destroying everything, leaving the citizens with nothing to do but scream and flee in despair. A female association staff member hurriedly ran along the corridor. She burst through the door into the office and shouted loudly, "Lord President, there is a colossal corrupted creature at the outer city wall." Haddon Ganslot, the president of the Capital Guild, still stood silently, looking out at the burning scenery outside the window, and softly replied, "I know already," Haddon bitterly admitted, "but there is nothing more we can do." He looked at the grim reality. When all those capable of fighting had been deployed outside to protect the citizens amidst rows of houses burning furiously, even the elite Holy Knight force, including August, was also currently having to exert all their efforts to withstand this attack. When the female staff member frantically asked what he meant, Haddon revealed a terrifying truth that right at this moment, half of the Holy Knight force had been dispatched for a mission far away from the capital. This news left the girl completely frozen in horror. The colossal monster with countless glowing eyes began to smash the architectural structures, sowing destruction everywhere. Haddon realized this was not a random incident, but an attack that had been calculated extremely meticulously. Right when the Holy Knights had just left, a monster roared, accumulating energy and launching a light pillar of ultimate destruction. Hadn't thought to himself that if the commander were present here, perhaps they could have prevented this. But currently, all hope seemed to have suddenly vanished. A colossal pillar of light swept across the capital, burning down everything in its path. Hadn't closed his eyes in deep pain. I'm afraid this is the end. This ending is too tragic, everyone. However, the panicked cry of the female staff member made him look in astonishment. President, look over there. The savior has appeared. Hadden stared wide-eyed out into midair with a look of disbelief. Amidst the destructive light flow, Jean had timely appeared. He gathered all his strength to activate the hexagonal nanoshields to stop the earth-shattering attack right in the middle of thin air. Hadden and the female assistant looked out the window in complete shock. He uttered, "That person is..." The girl beside him cheered in sheer excitement upon recognizing the identity of the savior from Kodama village. In the distance, the colossal monster, with glowing yellow lumps on its back, was still imposingly advancing to devastate the capital. Jean immediately landed on a rooftop. He gathered all the nano-energy into his fist. A blinding flash of light erupted. Jean unleashed a maximum energy beam aimed straight at the target. The terrifying surge of power pierced through space, dealing a heavy blow that made the colossal monster roar in agony. However, Jean soon realized the situation was not simple at all. Looking at the monster still standing firm after the attack, he silently assessed, "Its size is way too massive. I can't take it down completely." Jean felt his breathing start to quicken. He realized that the instant teleportation had consumed much more stamina than initially estimated. He thoughtfully said to himself, "Things seem quite tough now." Facing a difficult challenge, Jean decided to change his tactics. All right, time to get some exercise. A glowing blue energy blade appeared in his hand. Jean dashed away like lightning, swinging his sword to execute a powerful slash that tore through the rough skin of the monster. The precise attack made the hideous creature scream in absolute agony. Here, Jean dashed across the rooftops. He understood that with an attack like the one just now, the monster would soon recover immediately. However, that much was also enough for him to buy some more precious time. Jean told himself he must truly stay focused. He decided he would apply the most basic principles of the nanomachine to this battle. By manipulating gravity, Jean completely neutralized his body weight to move as effortlessly as nothing. He continued to control the atmospheric pressure to create extremely powerful wind currents, boosting his own speed to a terrifying level. Meanwhile, at another corner of the capital, a soldier was being pinned down tightly by the dark blue monster. He could only gnash his teeth helplessly in despair. Suddenly, a colossal fireball struck down, making the monster roar in pain. Two Beastmen students appeared just in time and proudly declared, "We are here to support you." Recognizing that the saviors were precisely the students from Heinous Academy, the soldier couldn't help but be deeply moved and expressed his sincere gratitude for the young men's bravery. Looking around the ruins, the students assessed that the capital was currently falling into an extremely perilous situation, and they were forced to take action immediately. While the monster encirclement was closing in, a glowing blue sword strike suddenly tore through space, finishing off the mutated creatures in the blink of an eye. Jean dashed past at a terrifying speed, then quickly closed in on the next target. Witnessing Jean fighting fiercely in all directions, the two beast race students standing nearby couldn't help but be amazed. One asked in wonder, "What on earth? That's unreal." The other looked at Jin's silhouette and skeptically asked, "That guy is an inferior species, right?" Receiving the confirmation, correct. Both of them could only stand frozen, watching the man they had originally despised single-handedly confronting the great disaster. Jean silently calculated that the monster would still take some time to be able to recover, and he had to utilize this opportunity to close the distance. Before that, it shot firepower at him, but Jean easily evaded it. Jean quickly observed and assessed that attack is weak as hell, it's just got a massive body. He decisively made a decision. If that's the case, then, with terrifying speed, Jean swung his sword, repeatedly taking down the monsters, blocking the path and timely rescuing the heavily injured citizens from their fangs and claws. Jean told himself he must end this battle very quickly before it manages to unleash its next attack. "I will end this here." He continued to dash away at a wind-tearing speed, continuously swinging sharp sword strikes to clear out the mutated creatures threatening innocent citizens. Faster, must be even faster. Jean gathered all his energy into his legs, his eyes glowing with absolute determination as he directly closed in on the colossal target ahead. Jean dashed straight toward the colossal monster with a raging, murderous aura. He moved agilely across the rooftops, continuously unleashing powerful slashes that tore through its rough skin. The power from the impacts caused the ground to crack open, and dense smoke and dust to billow up. A thunderous slash struck straight down from above, catching the monster completely by surprise, and leaving it unable to react before Jin's overwhelming power. August, along with the female knights, stood frozen in shock before the grand scale of the battle unfolding right before their eyes. Up on the city wall, Hakama and the students were also holding their breath, watching in absolute anxiety. Without wasting another single second, Jean dashed away at a terrifying speed, forming a blur that tore through space. He continuously unleashed sword strikes of vibrant blue energy, creating deep, gaping cuts all over the colossal monster's hideous body. Facing the massive entity that was like a mountain, Jean still bravely charged straight forward. He gathered all the remaining nano-energy into the decisive blow and thought to himself, "That's a wrap." Jean hurled himself into midair, roaring, "Let's end this." He created a lightning spear and lunged straight down at the monster's head. Headshot. With a shattering thud, the monster had been sent to bite the dust. A colossal blue light exploded, piercing through the sky and completely swallowing the mutated creature. That terrifying surge of power radiated a suffocating pressure, rising way above even the fortified city walls of the capital. Witnessing that horrific scene from afar, the beast race man and the female knight could only utter in complete shock, "Wait, what on earth is happening?" Amidst the burning ruins, Jean stood proudly beside the corpse of the monster, which had become completely motionless, leaving anyone witnessing it unable to help but wonder, where on earth did this godlike man come from? 3 days after the disaster passed, the capital began entering the reconstruction phase. The ruined houses were gradually being repaired, under the efforts of the citizens and soldiers. Jean stood silently by the window, silently assessing that although it was a major incident, fortunately, there were no damages that were too severe regarding human lives. He sat thoughtfully on the bed, telling himself it was all thanks to the excellence of the Holy Knight Squad. However, because they had to watch out for other colossal, corrupted creatures, many Holy Knights could not act freely throughout the battle. Nevertheless, the situation afterward was quickly brought under complete control. The Knights deployed everywhere to support the citizens and stabilize order. As for Heinous Academy, it was strictly locked down by the soldiers to serve a large-scale investigation. Master Richmond, the one believed to be the mastermind behind this entire plot, had been officially put in chains and arrested. Not only that, the instructors, and even the head of the academy, suspected of being involved were also escorted away one by one. Currently, they were all being interrogated intensely at the royal palace to clear up the matter. Jean lay down with his back against the bed, putting his hands behind his head and silently sighing, when thinking about the fact that the academy would probably have to close down for a long time, even though he himself had only started his teaching job for exactly one single day. However, his gaze suddenly became sharp and cold as he realized that precisely from this incident, he had acquired a new challenge. Jean thoughtfully calculated, if the enemy gathers in one place, I can handle them, but when they scatter like this time, there's no way I can wipe them all out. To protect everyone from the corrupted, he realized he needed to become even stronger. Looking at the nanocube in his hand, Jean made a firm resolution for that goal. Suddenly, a knock on the door rang out, making him turn back startled and ask, "Who's disturbing my beautiful dream?" Jean was stunned as soon as he opened the door to see Milia, standing there waiting, looking extremely gorgeous with a radiant smile. She softly said, "I'm here to pick you up." Seeing Milia blush and call him teacher, Jean couldn't help but be amazed. Teacher? He secretly wondered. The school is closed now. Who's going to pay my salary? Milia quickly explained the purpose of her visit. My brother is calling for you. Milia continued with a deeply sincere look. He wants to thank you for what just happened. It seems he also has something else he wants to tell you too. Hearing Jean ask whether it was absolutely necessary for her to personally come all the way here to call him, Milia proudly asserted, "Of course. To just send a servant to call someone as important as you would be way too impolite." She proudly declared that since she represents the Walton family, she had personally come here, leaving Jean completely speechless with a highly fed-up expression. Lord Jean curiously asked, "You're not going to call me an inferior species anymore, Professor? Does Jean like being insulted or something?" Milia blushed, showing a deeply philosophical look. I have thought carefully about that matter, and one shouldn't judge others by their appearance. We must always respect everyone regardless of who they are. She even earnestly wished to stay by his side to receive guidance and teaching from him. Right at that moment, Hakama unexpectedly appeared at the door and silently remarked about how fast the young lady changed her attitude. Seeing Hakama, Jean happily called out her name, Hakama. She casually explained that since the dormitory was too boring, she just came over here to hang out. Milia glared at the frolicking Hakama with total annoyance. This country bumpkin of a girl. Milia is jealous now, the conflict is super intense. She silently mocked. A country girl dares to arbitrarily burst in without permission, how truly shameless. She then pressed, didn't you say you already learned your lesson? The whole group together walked toward the magnificent and splendid mansion of August. Just as they stepped inside, rows of butlers and maids bowed respectfully in unison. Welcome back, my lady. Jean gently made a request to the two siblings. Could I trouble the two of you to lead the way for us? Pawaru and Nino radiantly replied, yes, sir. Watching the two siblings agilely leading the way, Jean silently assessed that they seemed to have gotten used to the work here. Pawaru smiled and shared, it's all thanks to everyone here. When Jean inquired to see if the two of them were injured in the recent riot, both asserted they were fine. Pawaru recounted that everyone at the workplace had protected them with combat skills and extremely powerful spirit magic. Jean silently felt at ease seeing that they were being taken care of very well. At the exact same time, Lady Milia also spoke up to praise the wonderful things that Jean had achieved. Jean asked with a bit of skepticism, who did you hear that from? Maria casually replied that she heard it from herself and Lord August. She proudly asserted that going around telling others about her teachers' glorious achievements is precisely the duty of a disciple like her. Jean could only stand dazed, wondering, when did I ever accept a disciple? Maria turned to instruct Pawaru and Nino that they should actively learn from Jean, since they belonged to the same race as him. Nino, taking advantage of the moment Maria was not paying attention, whispered in Jin's ear, revealing that until recently, Lady Maria was still very harsh with them. The boy continued with a look of relief, but lately, she has become a bit gentler. Jean silently compared this peak attitude flip to being just like Shaq in the past. The whole group stopped before a large, luxurious double door leading into the main guest room. Sir, we have brought Jean here. An authoritative voice from inside replied. Come in, I've been waiting. The door slowly opened, revealing August waiting along with a middle-aged wolf race man who had silver hair and an extremely sharp gaze, waiting with his arms crossed. Jean stepped into the room while Pawaru and Nino politely bowed and quickly withdrew outside. August spoke up, breaking the quiet atmosphere. Thank you for coming. Come over here and sit down. Let me introduce him first. This is the president of the Adventurer Guild at the capital, Lord Haddon Ganslot. Haddon proactively stood up to shake Jin's hand today. He was highly polite. I am Haddon. It is a great honor to meet you. I look forward to our pleasant cooperation from now on. He spoke in a low voice, recalling the recent incident. I also witnessed what you demonstrated the other day. To be honest, if you hadn't stopped that matter at the time, then this country would have definitely faced a massive crisis. Haddon unexpectedly bowed his head in deep respect. Therefore, first of all, I want to express my gratitude. Because you saved this country. Lord Jean casually waved his hand. I only took care of the biggest one. As for cleaning up the battlefield afterward, that was entirely the credit of this country's Holy Knight Squad. If you want to give thanks, go thank them. August smiled at Jin's humility, while Haddon thoughtfully observed. You are quite humble, aren't you? Don't you have any ambition at all, or is that just it? Haddon suddenly revealed a shocking piece of information. Because of this incident, the royal family of this country wishes to grant you an audience. The statement left Jean unable to help but be astonished. The royal family. However, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became extremely tense. Haddon stared intently at Jean with a sharp gaze. But before that, there is a matter we need to clear up first. Who are you? Is the teacher's secret about to be exposed, guys? He asserted that thanks to the network of guild members planted in every single corner, no news in this country could slip past his ears. Haddon continued to press. Forgive me, but I have also investigated you. However, I couldn't find a single scrap of information about you at all. It is as if you suddenly popped out of thin air. August also chimed in with a highly solemn expression. That is also the matter I want to clear up. Don't try to evade it. Confess the truth. Under the anxious gazes of Milia and Hakama, August intensely pressed. Where do you come from, and what Is your true purpose for coming to this country? Facing the pressure from two of the most powerful men in the capital, Jin's gaze became sharp and cold. August growled, giving a final warning. Hadden growled, asking for Jin's true purpose. For coming to this kingdom and demanding he be smart enough to confess the entire truth. However, Jin still maintained his leisurely attitude. He gently adjusted his glove and calmly replied, I didn't have any intention of hiding it either. Jin further explained that he kept silent simply because he thought even if he spoke out, no one would be able to believe it. Witnessing the tension, Maria and Hakama could only anxiously watch his every single move. Before that sincerity, August asserted, if those words come out of your mouth, I will believe them. Hearing that, Jin flashed a subtle, meaningful smile and replied, then I will take your word for it. His face suddenly became extremely solemn as he began to reveal his identity. I am someone who lived 100 million years ago. Jin's shocking assertion made the atmosphere in the room seem to freeze up. August thoughtfully recalled the legends about the taboo of Kodama village and uttered in astonishment. So that's how it is. You are precisely the human who had been fast asleep behind that never-opened door. Although Hadden still had a bit of skepticism, he also had to admit, it's truly hard to believe right away. But I believe you. They believe him just because Master Jin is handsome. Milia, at this moment, looked at Jin with eyes full of admiration. She spoke up to confirm the fact that the teacher had bravely gone down to the academy basement to open the ancient gate, which had long been sealed. Milia gently covered her mouth behind her fan, asserting that besides that matter, it was her brother, himself, and many others who had witnessed Jin's extraordinary power with their own eyes. His younger sister's assertiveness left August completely stunned. Maria, Lord August, still unable to overcome his shock before Jin's confession. He uttered, what on earth happened? Look at how proud her face is, good grief. Jin calmly explained that he himself had always been fast asleep underground in this country all this time. He stated that the only reason that made him seek out the capital was to gather information about this new era. Hadden thoughtfully listened and then asked, what kind of information do you want to know? Jin raised one finger and decisively replied, there are two kinds. First is about the corrupted. Jin revealed a shocking truth, that they had also existed 100 million years ago, making both August and Hadden utter in astonishment. With a sharp gaze, he asserted, according to proper logic, they shouldn't still be alive in this era. Before Hadden's wonder as to why they are still so resilient, Jin explained it was all thanks to the power of the spirits. He stated that the spirits from the ancient era were present everywhere in this world through colossal mechanical systems. Vibrant blue energy pillars from the spirit towers shot up into the sky, radiating a source of power that covered the entire globe. Jin explained that the corrupted originally could only survive in heavily polluted places. However, it was the spirits themselves that possessed the ability to purify the environment, sweeping away that pollution with powerful energy rains to eliminate the mutated creatures. Hadden immediately posed a tough question. Then why do the corrupted still exist in this era? Jin quietly admitted he himself didn't know the exact details either. He put his hand into his coat pocket, took out the cube, and activated the virtual screen containing Kagura's data. Jin seriously warned, my friend said that crowd is upgrading. Witnessing the technology that surpassed the era appearing before his eyes, Hadden couldn't help but utter in complete shock. What kind of high-tech is this? Hadden stared intently at the highly complex virtual screen. He was completely helpless, because he couldn't understand what principle this system operated based on. Deep down, both he and August couldn't help but still skeptically wonder if the man in front of them truly came from the era of 100 million years ago. Jin calmly explained that it was precisely the reason he sought out the capital. He wanted to find out how the humans of this era dealt with the corrupted through the ancient records preserved here. When Hadden inquired about the second goal, Jin decisively replied, that is to search for clues about the secret laboratories, including the one located right beneath this capital, the thing which was originally created by his very friend, Kagura. Jin revealed he was putting all his efforts into tracking down the laboratories scattered across the world. However, he silently calculated to keep the part of the information about upgrading his own power strictly to himself. With a glowing gaze full of determination, Jin proudly asserted that his sole goal for being present in this place was to completely wipe out the corrupted from the world. The entire room sank into silence as everyone sat back together to comprehend the burden that Jin was carrying on his shoulders. Hadden broke the atmosphere when remarking, This is indeed a crazy story. And August also had to nod in agreement. However, August flashed a trusting smile and asserted he would place his faith in Jean, because both of them shared the same ambition to destroy the monsters. He also did not forget to remind Jean not to reveal this matter to anyone else, if he didn't want to be regarded as a madman. Jean smiled slightly, replying, "I know already." When August asked for Haddon's opinion, the president admitted that if the captain already believed, then he would also believe. He further explained that someone with the intention to harm the kingdom would never risk their life to protect the castle like Jean did. Right as the discussion was taking place, a knock on the door rang out, interrupting the atmosphere. Pawaru along with Nino stepped inside and politely said, "Apologies for interrupting everyone's conversation. Today, Pawaru gently opened the door and stepped in. She politely announced that the scheduled time for the audience was drawing near. August stood up and asked if Jean, along with everyone, was ready and prepared. A luxurious carriage quickly started rolling, taking the whole group straight toward the magnificent and splendid castle of the kingdom of Cosmosia. Jean stood before the mirror, quietly admiring himself in an extremely elegant, aristocratic formal suit. He silently thought about the fact that he was about to have an audience with the royal family of this country, but still couldn't help but wonder, what's the point of wearing this? It's just exhausting. August and Haddon both nodded, asserting that this suit suited him very well. Even Maria and the girls also praised him in unison, leaving Jean with nothing to do but sigh. It's just a little bit hard to move around. Master Jean looks good in anything, right guys? Haddon spoke in a serious tone, reminding him that the person they were about to meet was the first prince, the one who was currently acting as regent on behalf of his imperial father, to run the country. We need to maintain proper etiquette. Please understand. Haddon instructed as the carriage officially passed through the city gate. Jean thought to himself with a highly fed-up expression, what a hassle. I only hope I won't be dragged into another mess. Inside the palace, rows of fully armed guards stood at attention along the pathway, creating an extremely solemn and high-pressure atmosphere. Stepping into the magnificent grand hall, August and Haddon simultaneously knelt down to perform their bows respectfully. From way up high, an authoritative voice rang out. So the savior who rescued the country from the crisis has arrived. Raise your head. Jean slowly looked up and recognized the person standing before him was precisely the first prince, Telephone's Cosmosia, a man with long blonde hair and pointed ears, carrying a highly arrogant demeanor. Jean proudly introduced himself. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Jean Shido. Prince Telephone smirked slightly. Humph. On behalf of my imperial father, who is currently ill, I will express gratitude to you as his representative. You have done very well. However, Telephones spoke with a condescending tone when mentioning his background. I heard August say that you come from Kodama village. It is quite a surprise that a talented person like you comes from such a small place. The statement caused Jean to pause for a moment and silently repeat with a look of skepticism, a small place, huh? Suddenly, Tells's gaze became sharp and full of calculation. He didn't hide his ambition at all and decisively ordered, I will speak straight to the point. Submit to me. The delusional prince, Telephones, demanded Jean to exert all his efforts to work for the country as a holy knight under his command. Jean looked up at the prince, his eyes darkening with a deep murderous aura before this highly imposing proposal. Facing the blatant coercion, Jin's gaze remained cold and deep, and there wasn't a single ounce of wavering before the prince's authority. Master Jean still kept silent, while Telephones smirked defiantly. What's wrong? Didn't you hear what I said? Master Jean is just busy despising you. Haddon knelt down in a panic, sweat pouring out from fear of a conflict arising. He weakly tried to intervene. Your Highness, we were the ones who summoned him. You shouldn't speak about the matter of. However, Jean decisively cut him off with a shocking declaration. I have no intention of staying in this country for long. Telephones narrowed his eyes with calculation. He slowly asked, I heard that you were working at the academy. Jean calmly replied that it was just a temporary job. The prince's gaze suddenly became sharp and highly dangerous as he pressed to know if Jean wanted to reject his proposal. Right as Jean just uttered an apology. I'm very sorry, but Telephones coldly interrupted with a face full of malice. Then there is no other way. The prince is having another tantrum. Immediately, the sound of cavalry footsteps thudded and echoed throughout the grand hall. A series of sharp sword blades were pulled out of their scabbards at the same time. Telephones proudly ordered the soldiers, arrest him for me. All the guards rushed in to surround him. Haddon was pinned down tightly onto the floor in astonishment. He yelled out in despair, "What? What are you planning to do, Your Highness?" Telephones casually threw out a slanderous accusation, claiming that in reality, Jean was currently suspected of the crime of treason. He began to twist the truth, using the reason that the ancient gate in the academy basement was originally a place that couldn't be opened, yet now it has become a place for invaders to hide. But Telephones coldly asserted, "People say that he himself was the one who opened that gate. Therefore, suspecting him is only a matter of course. Isn't it? Peak hypocrisy, I'm speechless." He even despicably claimed that even the act of Jean saving this kingdom was merely an elaborately staged play to win the hearts of the public. Before that blatant slander, Haddon gnashed his teeth in fury. Ridiculous. This matter is beyond absurd. Meanwhile, Jean still maintained a mysterious silence. Before the sharp spearheads pointing straight at him, Telephones rested his chin on his hand, uttering a cunning temptation. "Even so, wasting your power would be quite a pity. If you agree to serve me, I will overlook everything and investigate no further." He smirked, revealing sharp teeth, threatening that if Jean still stubbornly refused, then death would be completely unavoidable. Auguste knelt nearby, his forehead drenched in sweat from anxiety. He only arrived in this city not long ago. There's no way he could be involved in that matter. He silently blamed Telephones for ignoring the fact that he himself was the one who requested Jean to investigate the academy. Auguste realized in shock that he had fallen into the prince's trap. Looking at the dense security guard around, he recognized the presence of the captain of Squad 3 and the captain of Squad 4, the ones who swore blind loyalty and were ready to commit any injustice for the sake of Telephones. Auguste bitterly understood that these people would show no mercy to anyone, blocking their master's path. If he refused, they had already planned to eliminate him immediately. Telephones stepped closer, proudly declaring, "You are the one who defeated that invading giant. Leaving you free would be way too dangerous." He reached out his hand, his red eyes radiating a threatening, murderous aura, and delivered the final ultimatum. "But I am inherently magnanimous. I will give you one last chance. Swear your loyalty." A series of holy knights simultaneously closed in and tightly surrounded Jean. Amidst the brightly lit grand hall, Jean coldly replied to the prince's coercion. "What on earth are you dreaming about?" Before Tells's astonished look, he casually added, "A verbal oath in a place like this. What value does it even hold?" Jean frankly exposed the absurdity of this demand. Because even if he were to agree right now, if he were to run away afterward, that oath would be completely meaningless. His gaze was sharp and cold as he looked straight at his opponent and asserted, "You just want to hear it to satisfy your own ears, don't you?" Amidst the encirclement of sharp spearheads, Jean still maintained an astonishing composure. "I have thought it over carefully." He did not hesitate to question whether Telephones only wanted to satisfy his lust for power, or if there was actually some other dark conspiracy hidden behind. The words of Jean made the prince so furious that his eyes glowed red with murderous intent. Immediately, a muscular knight thrust a spearhead close to his neck and roared, "Shut your mouth right now. Who do you think you are talking to?" He grabbed that old guy's spear, swinging it with a mighty force that made him bite the dust immediately. The entire knight squad fell into chaos, rushing up to attack him. His arrogant attitude left Telephones and Auguste completely frozen in shock. A female knight intended to rush forward to attack, but she suddenly paused in sheer horror. Maria shockingly realized that she was completely helpless and wondered, "Why can't I activate my spirit magic at all?" Telephones roared frantically before his opponent's resistance. "Damn it, grab him quickly." The cavalry rushed in like moths to a flame, but Jean only smirked slightly. He continuously unleashed powerful strikes that sent the guards flying across the entire grand hall. A thunderous kick struck straight at an enemy's chest, sending him flying straight into the distance amidst a tragic scream. Meanwhile, Jean still calmly grabbed the spearhead of another soldier, with a highly arrogant look. Witnessing his subordinates being easily taken down, Telephones yelled out in fury, "Auguste, what the hell are you doing? Quickly lend us a hand. He must be made to pay for daring to oppose the royal family." Standing before the sharp command of the prince, Auguste just stood frozen, observing with deep blue eyes full of anxiety. Lord Auguste slowly drew his sword from its scabbard. He spoke in a low voice, warning, "Don't blame me then. Auguste joining the fray is too intense, everyone." Seeing the elite captain entering the battle, Telephones laughed out in sheer delight. "Ha, very well. Whether he lives or dies doesn't matter. Arrest him right now." The cavalry simultaneously rushed forward following their master's order. But a radiant blue flash of light suddenly knocked everyone far back, leaving the cavalry with nothing to do but utter in complete shock. Jin's voice echoed throughout the grand hall with absolute authority. You said leaving me free would be very dangerous. You are absolutely right about that. If I truly wanted to, then flattening this city would be an extremely easy task. The guards panicked, looking around the empty room. Damn it, where did he disappear to? Search carefully. Amidst the chaos, Jin proudly asserted that the reason he didn't devastate this place was because he wanted to stand on the side of the citizens, to protect the lives of the people today. Jin coldly declared that he always has exceptions, and toward wicked people who look down on human lives, he absolutely will show no mercy. Suddenly, Jin appeared right behind telephones like a ghost, making the prince's hair stand on end and his face turn pale with horror. He leaned close to his ear and uttered a sharp, cold threat. So, are you a human, or are you trash? Toward the trash, who defile the lives of others, Jin will give them exactly what they deserve. He leaned close to the prince's ear, growling a highly challenging question. Which category do you belong to? First Prince Telephone's Cosmosia? The direct threat made Telephones turn pale, cold sweat dripping down from horror as he realized the Grim Reaper was standing right behind his back. Below, the knockdown knight Wasa yelled out in fury. Do you even know what the hell you are doing? The female knight, Maria, firmly held her sword, firmly replying. I know very well. I am only resisting the person who coerces me into doing absurd things. The knight was astounded, unable to believe his ears. What? Do you want to oppose this entire nation? However, Jin coldly exposed the truth. The one who wants to rebel is not me, but you. He proudly declared that if it were royalty, he would show a certain amount of respect. Jin asserted, if it complies with the laws of the kingdom and the request is reasonable, I am willing to support you. But my value is not so cheap that I must shut my mouth and submit to absurdities. Looking at Wasa's furious face, Jin growled a warning. If you intend to use force to coerce me, then don't blame me for resisting. He still maintained his calm demeanor and said, but before that, I want to ask you one thing. Are you someone who always deludes themselves that everything will go exactly as you wish? Or are you something else? Jin's eyes glowed with an intense authority that left Telephones with nothing to do but freeze in absolute terror. He concluded with a highly meaningful statement. I've heard the whole story. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out as the grand hall doors were forcefully pushed open. Amidst the astonishment of all the knights holding their weapons at the ready, a figure appeared along with elegant words. The thing is, amidst the suffocatingly tense atmosphere, an elegant voice unexpectedly rang out, interrupting everyone. May I join this conversation? The large doors swung wide open, and a beautiful young lady with long, flowing platinum blonde hair, wearing a gorgeous blue dress, stepped inside. Her sudden appearance made the knight Wasa so panicked that he stammered, trembling and uttering in sheer horror. Princess Charlotte. August breathed a sigh of relief. He looked toward the princess with a face full of trust and softly said, You've arrived just in time. I'll leave the rest in your hands. Charlotte Cosmosia flashed a highly meaningful smile. She looked straight at her older brother and spoke with sharp irony. It seems you are having quite a lot of fun, dear brother. Seeing his younger sister appear, Telsa's expression instantly changed. He broke out into a cold sweat, his face showing clear embarrassment as he weakly called her name. Charlotte stood there, observing the prince's wary attitude toward his younger sister. Charlotte sighed deeply with a highly fed-up expression before her brother's brutal actions. You doing that is very troublesome. Since you've invited the hero who saved the nation here, you should have invited me too. She proudly asserted that she herself also had the right to be present, here to represent their imperial father. Telephones gnashed his teeth in absolute resentment, green veins popping all over his neck before his sister's interference. Right at that moment, a knight stepped close to Telephones and coldly declared, Unfortunately, the one standing here is not a hero. He is a criminal who dares to bare his fangs and claws at the royal family. Charlotte narrowed her eyes, looking down below, and asked for confirmation. Oh, is that truly how it is? Wasa knelt flat on the floor, furiously yelling out. That's right. That guy injured the commander of the 4th Holy Knight Squad. Wasa did not back down at all. Charlotte questioned him right back. Isn't it because you all behaved rudely first? The statement made Wasa's face flush with anger. He roared in fury. What on earth are you saying, Your Highness? The knight Wasa pointed his finger toward Jin and yelled out accusingly. Look at him. He is planning to assassinate the first prince of this country. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Princess Charlotte slightly tilted her head, wondering, how strange. Isn't he just standing behind my dear brother? She turned to look at Jean, with eyes full of goodwill, and asked, is that correct, Lord Jean Shido? Jean smiled slightly, calmly confirming, yes, exactly so. I was just standing behind and asking a question. Charlotte looked over at her older brother and continued, that is what he said, dear brother. Before his younger sister's interference, Telephones gnashed his teeth in absolute resentment, his face darkening with fury. Charlotte still maintained her radiant smile and continued to tease. Surely you wouldn't convict someone just because they stood behind your back, would you? You are not so narrow-minded as to treat a national hero like that, right? Looking at Telsa's face, which was contorting with anger, she turned over to solemnly call Jin's name once more. Charlotte proudly declared, I will not force you to serve this kingdom. But if the country faces trouble, would you be willing to help out as a friend? Receiving the highly goodwill response from Jean, I would be very happy to contribute my strength. Charlotte joyfully expressed her gratitude. She lightly clapped her hands and proposed, but this is not a suitable place to discuss matters. Let's change locations. Charlotte decisively ordered the soldiers. Lead the way for my friend. Open the way quickly and be absolutely respectful. Before the princess's authority, the female knight, Maria, along with the squad of soldiers, could only decisively bow their heads in obedience. Understood. While Telephone stood silently in the middle of the grand hall with a face full of utter resentment. The carriage rolled, taking the whole group away from the royal palace. Sitting inside the carriage, August had still not overcome his shock. He held his chest and breathed a sigh of relief. Earlier truly gave me quite a scare. Why did you do such a risky thing? Jean merely casually looked out the window and replied, well, it was just a little bit on a whim. Even though he had left the palace, Jean still didn't stop dwelling on the strange murderous aura emitted from the prince earlier. He slightly narrowed his eyes, secretly hoping that it was just his own imagination. However, the intuition of an experienced agent told him that things were definitely not that simple. Breaking the quiet atmosphere, the second princess, Charlotte, smiled gently at Jean and spoke, thank you for helping us. When Jean humbly said, there's no need to thank me, she immediately bowed her head with deep sincerity and expressed, on the contrary, for treating the nation's savior like that. We are the ones who need to apologize. Jean hastily waved his hand and replied, no, there's absolutely no need for that. Yes, Charlotte solemnly spoke up. Let me introduce myself properly once more. I am Charlotte, the second princess of this dynasty. I hope you will continue to maintain this close bond, Lord Jean. Before the highly goodwill proposal, Jean nodded slightly. Yes. Sitting opposite, August had still not overcome his shock regarding what had just happened. He anxiously asked, but why did the prince act in such an thoughtless manner? Charlotte's expression suddenly became extremely serious. She spoke in a low voice, revealing, I am not clear on what his true intention is either, but my royal brother is a man full of wild ambition. She stated that after ascending the throne, to expand the territory, Telephones intends to initiate wars with neighboring countries. When that time comes, he definitely thinks the existence of Jean will be a major obstacle to his ambition. Seeing Jean sinking into deep thought, Charlotte lightly clapped her hands with a sharp pop to reassure him. Don't worry too much. I won't let him interfere any further. She stated that what happened today had probably already been reported by Haddon to their imperial father, who was lying on his sickbed. Charlotte asserted, if our imperial father issues a confinement order, my brother will no longer be able to easily act against you. Lord Jean quietly looked out the window and softly replied, actually, that is not what I'm concerned about. Charlotte smiled with total determination. As for the throne, I have absolutely no intention of yielding it to him either. Do you believe me, Lord Jean? Looking into her radiant, deep blue eyes, Jean smiled slightly. I believe you. Yes. Suddenly realizing the carriage was still moving, Jean curiously asked, by the way, where are we going? August was also puzzled. Why is even the princess here? Charlotte gently replied, you saved this kingdom, Lord Jean. She explained that inviting someone like him without a reward, wouldn't that be way too impolite? Charlotte revealed, I heard you were temporarily staying at an inn. Jean nodded in confirmation. Yes, that's right. The carriage stopped in front of an extremely massive and splendid property. Charlotte, radiantly, pointing toward the magnificent mansion, proudly declared, therefore, we have prepared this place exclusively for you. Jean gazed in astonishment at the magnificent mansion before his eyes and softly uttered, this is It was a splendid building with pure white stone pillars and a majestic balcony. Charlotte proudly continued. Charlotte proudly declared, "From now on, this house officially belongs to you. Please feel free to use it however you wish." The moment he stepped inside, Jean was completely overwhelmed by the radiant space of the crystal chandeliers and the luxurious red-carpeted staircase. He silently marveled. What an incredibly fancy house. Still unable to believe the reality, Jean turned to ask again, "Can I truly accept such a massive gift?" Charlotte explained that this place originally belonged to a count, but had been left vacant for a long time. Jean was slightly surprised. A count? Jean couldn't help but worry about the legality of the gift. If that person comes back to claim the house, what then? Seeing Charlotte's mysterious expression, he clicked his tongue and told himself, "Well, forget it. I'm worrying too much." Auguste, standing nearby, immediately spoke up to explain that suddenly receiving a mansion might make Jean bewildered, but this was only to prove how highly they valued his capability. Auguste smiled encouragingly. "Just go ahead and move in without any hesitation, because this house is yours now." Continuing on to tour the immensely spacious bedroom, Jean fell silent, thinking, "I see, but for one person to live here, it seems a bit too spacious. Even the bedroom is this vast." Noticing Jin's awkwardness, Auguste immediately made a practical suggestion. "In that case, I will arrange for some maids to help manage this place for you." Jean was startled and asked back in complete surprise, "Maids? The harem's headcount is about to increase." Auguste asserted that Pawaru and Nino would definitely always be willing to serve Jean with all their hearts. He sincerely expressed that he himself owed Jean an incredibly immense debt of gratitude, then suddenly became serious. "But if you don't mind, could you listen to one more request of mine?" Jean curiously looked at him and asked back, "What request?" Right after that, the scene shifted to the special training ground of Squad 7, where cheers and the sounds of clashing weapons were echoing across the area. In the middle of the training ground, an intense practice match was taking place with wooden swords clashing sharply against each other. Karina exerted all her strength and rushed forward, swinging her spear to attack her opponent with astonishing speed. With a sharp gaze full of determination, she roared. With a decisive and skillful movement, Karina quickly overwhelmed her opponent. Pushed into a corner, the Beastman warrior, drenched in sweat, gnashed his teeth in frustration and weakly uttered, "Stop! I surrender. It hurts too much." The sound of applauding praise rang out. Maria stepped closer and gave her a compliment. "You are progressing fast." While wiping away her sweat, Karina humbly replied that she still needed to put in much more effort. However, her mind suddenly recalled the horrific memories from a few days ago, when she realized she only had enough strength to handle a few weak minions, while her own actual capability was still way too small. The image of Jean alone confronting the giant monster still constantly haunted Karina's mind, making her scratch her head in total irritation. How boring. Is there no one else to spar with? But deep down, Karina still couldn't stop tormenting herself with the question, why on earth could an inferior creature do such an extraordinary thing? Right at that moment, a soldier in a panic exclaimed upon seeing the group approaching, "The captain! Even Lady Charlotte is coming too." Auguste, along with Jean and Princess Charlotte, stepped onto the training ground. He softly spoke up, "Please continue your training, everyone." The moment she saw Jin's figure stepping onto the training ground, Karina's expression suddenly changed. She gnashed her teeth in total irritation. "Oh, it's that guy. What the hell is he doing here?" While Charlotte was being guided in a highly respectful manner, Jean turned to ask Auguste, "So what? What do you want me to do?" The captain softly replied, "Since you've come all the way here, you must have guessed it by now, right?" Looking at the soldiers below who were diligently training, Jean doubtfully asked, "You want me to instruct them?" Auguste decisively asserted, "Exactly so." Auguste explained in a low voice. Jean must have also witnessed the arrogant and dismissive attitude of Prince Telephones with your own eyes. Earlier, he revealed a brutal truth that currently, both Prince Telephones and Princess Charlotte were in an extremely fierce position of vying for the throne. Auguste was concerned that no one could foresee when that prince would resort to despicable tactics. He looked toward his comrades and proudly declared, "The only ones who can protect Princess Charlotte and have sworn loyalty are our Squad 7. With a worried look in his eyes, Agos urgently pleaded for help. "No one knows when a critical moment will strike. So, I want you to train them to be ready for that day." Jean quietly observed the fiery confrontations on the training ground and silently assessed The way you guys fight is only good for show. Urging shouts rang out continuously amidst the sharp clashes of weapons. Just a little bit more. Jean recognized that the soldiers of Squad 7 always trained very hard every day. However, witnessing their exhausting efforts, a sense of nostalgia suddenly flooded into his mind. Jean smiled slightly and thought to himself, looking at this scene reminds me of the time I was also drained of all my strength. He recalled the period from 100 million years ago, when he himself had also been just like that. In order to become an official national agent, Jean had to undergo frantic training regimes. From running while pulling stacks of colossal tires, to hours of harsh, high-intensity physical training. Breaking out of his thoughts, Jean, along with Auguste and Charlotte, stepped toward the center of the training ground. Auguste proudly ordered the entire squad. Everyone, gather here. Lord Auguste proudly declared before all the soldiers, today, to improve the training quality, we have invited a national hero to act as our special instructor. He will point out the shortcomings we need to overcome. Is that clear to everyone? The entire squad shouted in unison, "Clear, Commander." While the soldiers whispered praise about the person who had defeated the giant monster, Jean silently assessed, teaching those who are obedient is easy, but with the stubborn ones, it will be a bit of a headache to deal with. His gaze stopped at Karina, who was clearly showing a look of dissatisfaction. Jean began the training session with a simple request. First, I want to check your physical stamina. Now, everyone run around the perimeter of the training ground for me. Master Jean is up to his physical torment games again, guys. Immediately, Karina reacted fiercely, huh? She roared with absolute arrogance. That's a drill we already do every single day. There's no need to check our stamina. It's totally redundant. Did you come here just to make us do these trivial things? Maria frantically intervened. Karina, you are being truly insolent. Lord Auguste reminded her in a low voice. Karina, causing the girl to pause. Noticing the resistance, Jean smirked slightly. I'm very sorry about that just now. In that case, let's change our approach a bit. He took off his outer cloak, stepped straight toward Karina, and asked, that sounds interesting. The weapon you use is a spear, correct? Karina replied with a highly defiant look. Ah, that's right. Jean held the spear and made a proposal. Try to land a thrust on me once. There is no time limit. If you can touch my body, even just once, the running drill will be cancelled. Witnessing this wager, Auguste thought to himself, that sounds like fun. Jean clearly understood the psychology of these soldiers, thinking to himself, having to receive instruction from someone perceived as weaker than yourself is indeed something not everyone desires. Karina flashed a smile full of confidence. But do you even know how to use a spear? Jean only casually replied, don't worry. Immediately, he executed a series of spear movements at an astonishing speed. Jean stood commandingly in the middle of the training ground and proudly declared, I can handle any weapon. Don't look down on me. 100 million years ago, inside a modern training room, Jean back then was a young agent with an extremely well-built physique, diligently honing his skills with a long spear, demonstrating an extraordinary physical strength and the high concentration of a top warrior. Kagura, in a white lab coat, leisurely stepped in holding a cup of water and asked, oh, switching things up to spear swinging today, huh? Recognizing his familiar associate, Jean softly replied, Kagura. Kagura was curious about his personal life. Besides training, don't you have any other hobbies? Jean took a slight sip of water and nostalgically recalled, when I was little, I used to watch superhero shows. Kagura handed the cup of water to him and reminded him of the harsh reality Jean was facing. I'm talking about the present. You are the top agent this country has. Don't you think you should rest once in a while? Jean sighed and replied, I don't have time for that. Most of my missions involve infiltrating enemy organizations. He recalled the times he fell into desperate situations when he had to execute missions empty-handed. Back then, Jean had no choice but to grab whatever was around him, even a frying pan, to use as a weapon, to survive amidst the fierce encirclement of the enemy. Jean asserted, therefore, no matter what weapon I pick up, I must be able to master it. It's all for the purpose of increasing my own survival rate, even if it's just a small fraction. Witnessing his friend's extreme dedication, Kagura smiled slightly and gave a firm promise. Rest assured, I will make some high-tech toys for you to use. Karina rushed forward at an astonishing speed, swinging her spear to attack Jean relentlessly. The sounds of sharp clashes echoed continuously, but Jean still maintained an amazing composure. His sharp, cold, blue eyes intently observed every single opening in his opponent's strikes. He easily neutralized every dangerous spear trajectory from Karina, using only gentle, yet extremely precise parries and deflections. Witnessing her own helplessness, Karina couldn't help but be shocked and break into a cold sweat from exhaustion. Jean smirked slightly at his opponent and casually commented, 15-0 already, babe. Want to keep counting until tomorrow morning. Those words rubbed salt into her pride, making Karina gnash her teeth in frustration. She yelled out in sheer bitterness, one more time, without a single shred of hesitation. She rushed in like a moth to a flame once again. However, Jean still stood firm as a rock, decisively stopping her attack in just the blink of an eye. The confrontation took place at a breakneck speed. Jean silently assessed. Her movements are very fast, and her reflex speed isn't bad either. However, Jean pointed out her fatal flaw. Karina roared frantically, Aya, putting all her vital strength into the next strike, parrying the powerful thrust. Jean was silently amazed by the female knight's actual strength. Her strength is also quite incredible. Every time the spears clash, I can feel the terrifying weight behind each of her strikes. Jean was as fast as a flash, completely reading her movements. He executed a sharp spear strike that knocked away Karina's weapon, causing her to collapse to the ground in utter shock. Jean stood commandingly there, looking at his opponent with a stern gaze, and decisively declared, that's enough. Even though she had just been knocked down, Karina still yelled out with total determination, I can still keep fighting. But Jean merely sighed slightly with a highly fed-up expression. What a waste of effort. He turned his back to walk away and coldly pointed out the reality. You have already exhausted your physical stamina. The more you try, the weaker your stance becomes. The blunt comment left Karina completely frozen in shock. Jean silently assessed that just as he had predicted, she completely lacked endurance and was trying to use raw physicality to cover up her lack of technique. Her fighting style was still way too far from reaching the necessary level of refinement. Jean realized that perhaps because in this era, spirit magic is the main focus of every battle. Compared to the warriors in his era, the standards for necessary skills were completely different. He told himself, first of all, I need to rebuild her basic foundation of physical stamina. Jean looked down at Karina, who was kneeling flat on the floor, and asked, You don't have any objections, do you? Though her heart was full of resentment, silently cursing, Damn it. Karina also couldn't deny her opponent's complete dominance. Looking at Jin's outstretched hand, Karina couldn't help but wonder in shock. He hasn't even broken a single drop of sweat. What on earth is he made of anyway? Before Jin's inquiry, Hey, do you plan to lie there until tomorrow morning? She hesitated for a brief moment, but then also had to silently admit, I must accept it. This person is very strong. Overcoming her personal ego, Karina decisively grabbed Jin's hand to stand up, officially acknowledging the unbelievable strength of the man before her eyes. Jean turned to look at the entire squad and made a suggestion. In that case, should we start with a few laps of running? Before the eyes of Auguste and Maria, the soldiers, though still a bit astonished, were also ready to begin the harsh training session. As the night gradually fell, enveloping the capital, a black crow with glowing red eyes flew across the gloomy castle. Inside the dark corridors, a mysterious figure, holding a lantern, quietly walked amidst the cold stone walls. At a deep, dark corner inside the capital's dungeon, the figure holding the lantern quietly stepped up to the cell of the one who was chained. Seeing the prisoner, the first prince, Telephones, smirked and uttered sarcastic words. As a greeting, Is it comfortable in prison, old man? Lord Ruthven? Facing the prince, Ruthven still maintained a tough attitude and coldly replied, Shut your mouth. Do you and I have anything to talk about? Telephones chuckled softly. He narrowed his eyes, observing the Lord's strangely calm demeanor. Oh, even in this situation, you are still quite calm, aren't you? Are you still plotting something? Stepping closer, Telephones leisurely uttered a highly meaningful threat. Well, let's see. However, let me tell you one thing. Even if you manage to escape this time, the royal family will ultimately come to destruction anyway. Telephones, unexpectedly, took out an item, a piece of jewelry radiating a bizarre purple energy, leaving the Lord in utter shock. Absurd. How did you get that? Telephones looked at the treasure and sneered. Did you think you were the only one with access to this thing? The tools of the eroders. Tools infused with the power of the eroders. Correct. Telephones looked straight at Ruthven and firmly asserted. I guess that's right. You used a tool of the eroder to start this mess, didn't you? He began to win the Lord over. Now, don't get ahead of yourself. The real conversation is only beginning now. You utterly despise the Cosmosia royal family, don't you? In that case, why not join forces with me? Before Ruthman's astonishment, telephones coldly exposed the reality. Both my father and Charlotte are too naive. At this rate, the country will sooner or later be invaded and destroyed. Ruthman tremblingly asked back for confirmation. You are a member of the royal family, yet you want to destroy it? Telephones only replied with a highly determined look. Exactly. Destroy it completely, then rebuild it to make it premium. Telephones proudly declared his burning ambition. This country needs to be rebuilt from scratch to become a stronger, more authoritative nation. Before that highly ambitious vision, Ruthman contemplated for a moment, then slightly nodded. Fine. I cannot promise to put you on the throne of this new nation. But that doesn't matter. In return, telephones extended his hand holding the glowing treasure toward his opponent and ordered, swear your loyalty, or I will see you out. Ruthman asked back in bewilderment, loyalty? And received a confirming nod from the prince. Yeah, it would be very troublesome if you were to betray me later. Deep down, the lord sneered with utter contempt. You fool, what meaning does a single oath even hold? I will use you until you outlive your usefulness, and will eliminate you at the final minute. With a fake smile on his lips, Ruthman proudly made his oath. Fine, I swear to be loyal to you. Telephones flashed a highly malicious smile. You've fallen into the trap, you old bird. While Ruthman was still bewildered and didn't understand what was happening, the purple energy from the treasure suddenly exploded violently, enveloping his entire body. Glowing bizarre ancient characters appeared all around, tightly locking down the mind of the lord in absolute shock. Ruthman completely collapsed, his eyes transforming into an infatuated purple as he uttered the oath unconsciously. I swear to be loyal to you. That was precisely the terrifying power of the eroder's tool. It will place an extremely powerful suggestion on anyone who utters specific words. Even if it is a temporary lie, it still creates a suggestion, so powerful that it makes the victim believe that it is the true desire deep within their heart. Ruthman was now completely subdued, kneeling flat at the prince's feet in an extremely pathetic manner. With eyes glowing with complete infatuation, Ruthman earnestly begged, Your Highness, please command me according to your will. Telephones looked down with a smile full of contempt. How pathetic. Just the very idea that someone of low blood like you would try to replace the royal family already makes me feel nauseous. He casually turned his back to walk away, treating everyone merely as pawns for his own use. He leaned close to the lord's ear and asserted, the one who should rule this country is not Charlotte, and definitely, absolutely not you. Telephones proudly declared with total ambition. This nation will be led by me.